think we can go ahead and get started.
This conference will now be recorded.
And I will call the meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. Welcome, everybody. Let's do a round of introductions. I'm Nancy Wise, Commissioner and Chair of the Board.
Pat Malone, Commissioner and Vice Chair. Good morning.
Zan Ojiro, Commissioner. James Corney, County Council.
Jeff Van Arsdal, Benton County Sheriff.
Matt Weatherall, Acting County Administrator and Juvenile Department Director.
Dave Busby, Corvallis Emergency Planning Manager.
Erica Milo, Board Recorder.
Good morning, April Holland, Public Health Administrator.
Larry Bogan, Administrative Specialist.
Joe Kirby, County Administrator.
All right, I see we have a couple other people with us, but we can go ahead and get moving along. We have announcements. Are there any announcements? Hearing and seeing none, but I will ask if you are not speaking to please mute yourself. Thank you. Next up, comments from the public. If there are any public comments, you can have 3 minutes. And if you would like to comment, please put your name in the chat.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Christina Jansella, and I would like to do a public comment, and I'm trying to find the chat. So I'm new at this, so I'm not sure. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Christina, loud and clear. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
What sparked this participation in this hearing was an article in the Gazette Times regarding the tax increase for tobacco. I am not opposed to the tax increase, but I wanted the board to be aware of the unintended consequences regarding the current tobacco ordinance in Benton County. On February of in 2017, I believe, I can't be exactly sure, but a representative from the Benton County Health Department proposed that there be a 1,000-foot rule between tobacco retailers in schools and tobacco retailers and other tobacco retailers. My issue is the 1,000-foot rule between tobacco retailers. The unintended consequences is that it doesn't provide a fair, competitive market in the industry. And it also prevents the 1,000-foot rule as businesses are in the central business district downtown where it's very condensed. 1,000 feet is a lot compared to 1,000 feet that's on 9th Street or Circle. It's much more expanded versus the downtown. So when I say it creates an unfair competitive market in the industry. During the 2017 City Council meeting regarding this 1,000-foot rule, Mark Shepard was saying that he wanted to ensure of the potential impact to development throughout the city because of this 1,000-foot rule. And also that that they believed Council York, pretty much a lot of these councilors that I'm citing are no longer on City Council, but they viewed if there was any sort of businesses in this meeting that maybe they would have thought better about this 1,000-foot rule. And at the end of the meeting, Councilor Bull had asked the staff to bring the ordinance back for review in 1 year to see how it is impacted the community. So since 2017, nothing has been done. I did look at the ordinance, and I know it pretty much, not too much with Benton County, but with the city on the ordinance, section 8, number 8, it says any exemption granted to a tobacco retailer. The thing is just that wording, an exemption granted, there's no pathway to an exemption. There's no pathway to a variance, but the ordinance says any exemption granted. So it's kind of vaguely written the way that it is. And I intend to bring this up to Corvallis City Council.
Take another couple seconds to wrap up.
Okay, I intend to bring this up to the Corvallis City Council. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. I appreciate it. I was actually on the city council and remember that well. So if you would like to chat, feel free to send me an email or a phone call, and I would love to talk with you about that more.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else who would like to testify? I will note too, our public hearing is going to be set for 11 a.m. and any testimony related to the public hearing will come at 11 a.m. Any other comments from the public not related to our public hearing? Hearing and seeing none, we can review and approve the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Hearing and seeing none. Oh, Pat?
Yeah, under other, I would like a brief discussion of Benton County's participation in the timber lawsuit and potential discussion of the potential appeal of the ruling of last week.
All right, thank you. We will add that under other, and I will consider the agenda approved. Moving on to the work session. We have a COVID update from Department Operations Center with Suzanne Hoffman and April Holland. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'll turn this over to April. Thanks, April.
Good morning. Thanks. Morning, Commissioners, Joe, and everyone here. It's been a few weeks, and as usual, I have news on COVID-19. Our cases are high, are really high. The reported cases are. Benton County has ascended to the CDC community levels medium tier as of last Thursday on the CDC website. This change is due to the rising count of COVID-19 cases and doesn't reflect increases in the change to medium tier around hospitalization. So it's solely based on the high rates of reported cases that we're seeing. So in the last 7-day period for the week starting April 24th, our total reported cases reached 253. The last time we saw that was second week of February. So we've really jumped back up with a new wave, much smaller wave. Hopefully it'll stay that way. And this one attributed to one of the subvariants of the Omicron variant. So that 253 cases corresponds to a rate of 268 per 100,000. Benton County's rates of reported cases are surpassed only by Multnomah County, where the rate is 287 per 100,000. So, obviously we've been looking into our cases to determine why Benton County appears to be disproportionately affected in terms of reported case rates. And really, there are a couple things that come to top of mind. One of them is looking at our rates of testing. In terms of testing, when you look at our weekly tests and turn them into a rate per 100,000, Benton County continues to test a lot of PCR testing is still conducted here. And we're second only to Multnomah County. So like the case rates being second, we're also second to Multnomah County in the rate of testing that we're conducting. So this really reflects on testing availability and access. And as we see less PCR testing availability due to lack of funding, lack of capacity, changing circumstances, leading perhaps to increased reliance on rapid testing or less testing overall, we're going to see big variations in reported cases. And it's important to continue to look at these rates as, you know, looking at additional pieces of information, such as our increasing positivity rate and our high levels of virus detected in wastewater sampling, both here and statewide. Those counties that are doing high levels of testing can be looked at as bellwethers, because it's not that we are alone in having high rates of community transmission. It's that we're doing the testing to show for it. And that's not to say that other counties are doing anything wrong. We're just in this space of having different options. And I'm grateful for the ability to have Samaritan, Willamette Valley Toxicology, and others continuing to provide PCR testing. So I know a lot of people are asking, why us? And it's a lot of it is in the testing. I'm also looking at recent infection. You know, counties with the highest infection rates in the first Omicron wave may have, you know, have some lasting immunity relative to those who did not. Basically, the newer variants are even more transmissible and are reaching people who henceforth haven't been reached. So looking at a breakdown of our cases recently, I mentioned to you the last few times that we met that we saw some disproportionate reporting in certain age groups, and that's kind of balanced out a little bit. So we're seeing cases in all age groups and pretty in line with what we've seen in previous waves in terms of not seeing disproportionate impacts either on very young or very old. We don't have a large number of confirmed outbreaks at this point. And, you know, right now we're really focused in on the high priority, higher risk settings. So this, you know, all points to having widespread community transmission that's just disseminated throughout. So after we talk about cases, it's important to look at severe impacts. Hospitalizations have increased, but they do remain below critical levels. If we look at kind of month over month, on April 4th, there were 99 people hospitalized in Oregon. And yesterday, on the 2nd of May, there were 168 hospitalized. So that is a 70% change month over month, roughly. However, with the it is not as impactful as say the Omicron wave or the Delta wave, certainly with the proportion of cases to hospitalizations. It's expected still through the OHSA modeling that we may reach 200 to 300 hospitalizations in this wave, and of course we'll see what's around the corner. I mentioned earlier that we moved into the medium tier of the CDC community levels, and I just want to explain briefly what a move to the high tier would require. So in addition to a case rate above 200 per 100,000, which we currently have, we'd need either 10 or more admissions per 100,000 in the last 7 days, or 10% or higher staffed inpatient beds in use by COVID-19 patients, also in the last 7 days. And so currently we're at 4 COVID admissions per 100,000 in the last 7 days, and 1.3% of all staffed inpatient beds in use by COVID-19 patients. So as you can see, cases are high, hospitalizations and impacts to our hospitals locally not reaching those high severe, critical levels according to the CDC criteria. which is good. So I want to talk a little bit about vaccine. We have a lot of vaccination activity ongoing. If you need to become up to date on your COVID-19 vaccines, there are currently a lot of opportunities right now. A vaccination event is currently running at the fairgrounds today and tomorrow from 1 to 7 p.m. You can drive in and get that booster or second booster or your first or second dose taken care of. We also have several retail pharmacies. Sam Care Express is now offering COVID vaccination by appointment Monday through Thursday. We've got vaccination at the Lincoln Health Center in South Corvallis 3 days a week, and we're going to make the rounds to our circuit of schools and the Boys and Girls Club later this month. All that information is on our website, and people are welcome to call our COVID-19 call center as well for more information on circulating variants, risk, vaccination, and more. Back to the COVID-19 community levels. You may have noticed that those levels are green, yellow, and reddish orange, but I like to think of them akin to a traffic light. It's intended now, as we have moved into this level, to signal caution. We recommend everyone to slow down, assess their activities, and consider some additional protective measures at this time of increased transmission. So of course, we recommend that everyone is up to date on all recommended COVID-19 vaccine doses. We also, ventilation is also very important with COVID-19, as fewer people are masking and we're enjoying indoor spaces. Choose indoor spaces with good ventilation. If the air seems stuffy, ventilation may not be good. Look for open windows and doors, and for your own spaces or in your place of business, pay attention to improving indoor air by increasing ventilation or using HEPA filtration and other strategies. Ask yourself what could be done to improve the flow of air. EPA has recently released guidance that is very good on helping businesses improve indoor air quality. We want people to assess the risk and choose their precautions. More time spent unmasked in indoor places equals more risk. Crowded indoor places with poor ventilation include where you're doing aerobic exercise, where singing, loud talking is happening. So consider changing how you interact in those spaces. Outdoor activities are generally lower risk. And then finally, a lot of people, we may choose to wear high quality and well-fitting masks, such as a KN95, an N95, or a KF94 in crowded indoor spaces. This is especially important for people who are immunocompromised, have high-risk medical conditions, or unvaccinated, or not up to date with vaccinations, including booster doses. And then utilizing testing. We've got these rapid tests, and they are effective at knowing, at telling when someone is currently infectious. So consider rapid testing before indoor group gatherings, especially if high-risk people are going to be there. And then finally, if symptoms develop, test and isolate. Keep that well-fitting, high-quality mask on if you've been exposed to a confirmed case, and and reach out to public health or to your provider if you have any questions. I want to finally just share some pieces of news. As we move on in the pandemic, we're doing a lot of public health outside of COVID, which is really great. I'm not going to update you on this because this is a COVID-19 update, but I do want to share some pieces of news that we are watching that does relate to COVID-19. So we're watching events in South Africa as they grapple with a new surge, which appears to be caused by two new subvariants of Omicron called BA4 and BA5. Preliminary information suggests that for unvaccinated people, these subvariants may evade the immunity from an Omicron infection. They also appear to spread more readily even than BA2, putting it up there into unbelievable territory with measles and perhaps beyond. And then in South Africa, while hospitalizations have increased, it's not yet clear if these subvariants cause more severe disease. These variants have recently been detected in low levels in the United States. So it's likely that the roller coaster will continue with continuing changes with the virus. Staying up to date with vaccination is very important as we don't know what's around the corner with this virus. We're also looking at the news around vaccines for young children. Both Moderna and Pfizer vaccines will be discussed in upcoming FDA committee meetings in June, unless something changes, and maybe they'll take place sooner. And the Benton County team continues to prepare for this eventuality by working with pediatric clinics, other providers, pharmacies, and partners to ensure availability, and for Benton County events specifically to ensure access for underserved community members. And then finally, Senate Bill 1554 passed during the 2022 legislative session. It commissions a third party to do an after-action report related to the local and state COVID response. And OHA is looking to convene a diverse group of partners and leaders to assist with the selection of the contractor and provide some initial feedback on each of the reports prior to their finalization. Benton County has volunteered to sit in on this group, and I'd be glad to keep you apprised of the process as it moves forward. So with that, I know I went through that quickly, and there's a lot more information I could share, but I'll stop there, and I'm happy to hear any questions you might have.
Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, a couple of questions. April, you mentioned testing supplies and that we're doing a lot of testing. I know there's a bill in Congress to for more funding for COVID response. I guess the question is, are we in pretty good shape currently for testing supplies, or are we really in need of more federal dollars to help our response?
I'd say that we're really in need. We are on shoestrings here. Certainly at the county level, our COVID-19 funding through our FEMA vaccination project ends at its current 100% reimbursement at July 1, and it may continue with a cost sharing. However, everything we do here, it's pretty large scale, and it costs a lot of money, so those funds are drying up. And then the federal funds that will help, they will help counties with less access, less readily available testing, so that the counties themselves and their partners can provide that testing. We are so fortunate here to have an infrastructure that includes a lot of testing, as well as a population that has insurance and access to testing. The federal dollars for covering PCR testing for uninsured people has lapsed. So we have to, find pathways for people who need treatment for COVID-19, for example, so that they can have timely COVID-19 testing by PCR. So I'd say there's a grave need for more funding federally and locally as well.
Okay, thank you. My other question, you mentioned what's going on in South Africa. As far as vaccines, I assume pharmaceutical folks are trying to keep up with the variants. By next fall, would you anticipate some of the available vaccines will have morphed, hopefully, along with the COVID morphine? Is that what's in our future?
I think that's something along those lines is in our future. you know, every year for flu, we look at the other half of the world to determine what our combination of the current flu vaccine is going to be to kind of make a best guess. And we could see a similar method with subvariant specific or variant specific COVID-19 vaccines. I know there's a lot in development, and I don't really have any idea on as to a timeline, but we're really fortunate that at least for right now, vaccination with the original formula continues to provide very good protection against severe illness and death. You know, unfortunately, for anyone who doesn't like needles or doesn't want more vaccine, it is good to have a boost in those neutralizing antibodies every once in a while, which is why we continue to see more boosters out there. But I do think that will change over time.
Okay, great. I really appreciate this update.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for April? Seeing
Just a
none.
thank you. And thank you for taking part in the OHA after action report. I really appreciate that.
Joe, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Commissioner. April, the question I have is, how do we compare versus Lane County, considering we're both university communities, and I would imagine Lane County also has ready access to testing. So can you speak to how we compare?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe. I was just, I did include Lane County in the counties that I looked at and broke down the testing rates for. Lane County is really close in terms of weekly rate of testing to Benton County for the last week of data that I have. Not very much daylight between them. You know, OSU is no longer requiring weekly testing of unvaccinated students, and they don't have as much. I mean, they're doing a good a bit of testing for symptomatic people. However, it's not artificially sort of pushing down our positivity rate like it did before, because we had such a volume of people who were unlikely maybe to be sick. So Lane County, I don't know what the levels of testing at U of O are like, and if they're offering walk-in PCR testing for anyone. OSU has moved to making rapid tests available, and then if someone is symptomatic, they can get a PCR test. So the dynamic might be a little different, but those testing rates are really similar. And then Lane County does have a lower case rate right now. So I think the big question there is what kind of testing is attributed to the university community. And I meet every Tuesday afternoon with a rep from OSU, and I can connect with Dr. Ledke to get the information about U of O if I don't get it from OSU.
Thank you.
Thank you, April, and thank you, Suzanne. We really appreciate you coming and sharing all that information with us. All right, we can move on to the next agenda item, 4.2, discuss community wildfire protection plan. And my agenda says Inga Williams with Community Development, but I see we have some other staff members on as well. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. My camera, oh, here we go. It's a little different format, so didn't want to work right away. Okay. All right. Again, good morning. So the purpose of this work session is to update you on the CWPP process to date, to go into what the current status is, and then what our future steps will be. Then take your comments, your concerns, and then answer any questions that you might have. So the process to date, the process started in December of 2020, and that began with an email to basically create a steering committee to guide the whole process that was going forward. And that was originally sent out early December of 2020. And The original committee members were to be Rick Smith, who's a fire chief, Ted Erdman with Oregon Department of Forestry, Eric Jacobs, who was the community forester for the Dallas branch of the Oregon Department of Forestry, Dave Busby, who is with the City of Corvallis Emergency Operations, Gary Stockoff, and a gentleman from OSU, Jack Breen, who I don't believe ever actually was involved. So you'll see the little bit further on that we included some other OSU members and Brian Lee. So we created that steering committee. I did get some responses, and in January of 2021, did send out introduction emails to create a technical advisory committee, and then also a community advisory committee. And altogether on the advisory committee, there were about 62 people. And those includes and still included at that point, Firewise chairs, potential Firewise community organizers, members of some of the community advisory committees or citizen advisory committees, a member of the Planning Commission. I did send out personal emails, direct emails to the citizen advisory committees and the Planning Commission to ask for persons who are interested to be on my advisory committee. Some OSU Extension and Forestry Department personnel, representatives from each of the rural fire districts and the city fire departments, the Oregon Department of Forestry, USDA, BLM, USFS, a lot of acronyms, FWS, the NRCS, and then some from our various county departments. And I keep this list. Every time I send out an email to this list, I do ask who wants to continue to be on the list, and if they are no longer active, who can take their place, basically. So we'll keep it updated as necessary. So I created the advisory committees, the technical and the community advisory committees, and then I put the documents on our FTP website, asked them to download that and start making comments and corrections and suggested inclusions, other edits to those documents. And I did receive 7 emails back on that. So in March, met with the steering committee to get ready. We had set a meeting for the full advisory committee, the technical and the community advisory committee, to meet together on the internet on April 6th. So in March, met with the steering committee to work through the agenda and what it is that we wanted to get out of that April 6th meeting. Had that meeting, was very well attended. And then shortly after that, Eric Jacobs left his position as the community forester for the Department of Forestry. And so that position was vacant until late last year. And that was now currently filled by Trask Hodgson. So in June of 2021, Greg and I updated you on the scope of the project, got your approval of that scope, as well as the proposed vision, mission, goals, objectives, and policies, the draft. That was obviously changed since that time, but at that point, we got your approval of what was put forward. And then in August, I did some revisions, and then in August, I sent out an email to the steering committee and asked for them to review the draft CWPP to that point, and had a meeting with them in late August to discuss that draft and get some more revisions to that. In October, I sent the revised draft out to the full advisory committee to ask for their feedback, and received 5 responses with comments and suggestions, and then worked on, again, revising the draft. And then early November, Greg and I met with Alyssa and Genevieve to try and work out outreach plans for the beginning of 2022, when we were hoping to have the final draft, rough draft, ready for public comments. So we're now into the 2022 and finalize the final rough draft, ready for public comment, and sent out on early March of 2022, emailed the full advisory committee with the links to those documents, asked them to forward to their community members, put on websites. So this includes all of the fire defense board members to put on their websites, and also any of the community members, the Firewise chairs, whatever, to send it out to their lists. Genevieve put it out to the community on the county's listserv. And I received comments back from 9 people with suggested changes. And 100, also in that outreach was a survey. We are asking the community to respond to the survey, which I can go over after this update. I can go over some of the information that came back in that survey. And I received 101 responses, which was very good. And then there was a request to extend the public outreach portion. So we did that, extended it to April 8th. Genevieve put it out again to the public, again, emailed the full advisory committee, and I received 4 more comments and 17 survey responses. So that from beginning of March to April 8th was basically our public comment period. And then on April 19th, I had a small meeting. We only had 7 members of the community advisory committee respond back to have a small meeting to discuss the results of the outreach and what we could do further. We had a request for an extension from the Fire Defense Board Chair and also the Department of Forestry, our new forester, Leah Williamson, and they asked to delay finalizing the Community Wildfire Protection Plan because of the ongoing public outreach that the state is doing and the creation of the new fire risk map. So they asked to delay the approval of the CWPP until after at least the fire risk map was done, so that we could include that into this. So that was one of the items that we wanted to ask, to make sure that you were okay with that delay. I don't know if you want to respond to that now, or we can just respond to that later. Yes.
Commissioner Malone and then Commissioner Ozero.
Yeah, the delay makes sense. Is there any negative consequence to putting this off to, looks like, July?
No, there's no. The CWPP is a voluntary document that we create. So the one that's in that we currently have can continue until this new one is approved.
Great, thank you.
One thing, commissioners, I will share, and I know Inga kind of touched on it. There is actually a huge advantage of waiting, not just so those risk maps are done and our plans more accurate, but there's a possibility that if we adopt an old maps, basically old data, that it could preclude us or cause an issue with us And by us, I mean also ODF specifically, to receive additional funding that's tied to this plan. So it really behooves us to wait until those maps are updated, formalized, and published, that then we can incorporate those into our plan. And I saw Michael Currian and Leo Williamson also turn on their cameras, so they might be able to share more information on it.
Yep. So for the record, my name is Michael Curran. I'm the district forester for ODF's West Oregon district, located here in Philomath. So yep, the county is spot on. Through the Senate Bill 762 legislation, there's a lot of pieces tied to it. And it's all based off this new wildfire risk map that's being created by Oregon State University. So it's going to be, I think, imperative moving forward that all county CWPPs use the updated fire risk data that's part of these maps. You know, obviously, first and foremost, funding is a big one, and future funding could be tied to it. And then the other piece, this map is going to be kind of the baseline moving forward for all the different pieces of legislation that was part of Senate Bill 762. So the creation of wildland urban interface areas, and new, whether it's defensible space standards that have yet to be created, or building code standards that have yet to be created. So what we did was just recommend, and like I said, the big piece for us is just the funding moving forward, is that future funding could be tied to this. So I think it would be, or it'd behoove us to wait. And that map is supposed to be finalized by June 30th, 2022 at the latest. So depending on what changes there are to the fire risk data, it should only delay being able to finalize the county CWPP by 2 to 3 months at the most here, is our hope.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ojero, I had previously queued you up. Was there anything you wanted to add or ask?
Well, I wanted to concur. I believe that the delay is definitely worthwhile for all of the reasons that have been enumerated by Brian and Michael and Inga. And I do have a handful of questions, and one big comment, and that is that it's hard for me to judge the overall CWPP. I think it's a much improved document. I really like all of the background material. It's fantastic. It gives kind of a good sense of the level of understanding of fire and fire risk in our county right now, and the best available science and knowledge. But when it comes to the strategy matrix and the projects, that's where I'm a little uncomfortable, because I think that at the kind of the policy level, it's fine. When you start to get into specific strategies or specific projects, I don't know what criteria are being used. I can't tell, and especially without the current risk map, I don't know whether we have the right projects listed. And in some cases, I know we don't have the right lead groups listed. So I'm looking forward to seeing this come back to us one more time, and being able to understand better why we're prioritizing what we are, and taking a look at those key pieces, the strategy matrix and the project tables, because that's what's going to inform our work over the next few years. The other point I'd like to make is that in looking at one of the appendices, Appendix C, you know, we talk about why the fact that some projects were dropped from the 2009 plan to the 2016 plan, and then, but there's no rationale in many cases for why they were dropped, and there's just an assumption that they will stay dropped, and I don't. I'm uncomfortable with that kind of decision making, where we don't at least provide some rationale for why we made a decision, so that future boards or future staff can go back and understand the decision-making process. In particular, when I look at that list, I look at Vineyard Mountain, and Vineyard Mountain is at the top of the list with the most structures vulnerable. It is a vulnerable place in terms of their road network, and so on and so forth. But it's a really unique place because it is self-governed. They have their own road district, their own park district. They're not part of the county road network, 47 miles of road, and it's vulnerable. So I think despite the fact that it's not ours, we need to be thinking about how to work closely with Vineyard Mountain and all of those special districts and our fire colleagues, because I think that that's a problem that's potentially waiting to happen.
Thank you, Commissioner Ojero. And can we just have staff address the next steps? So if we concur to put this off a little bit longer, it does come back to another work session. Is that correct?
Oh, it definitely can. So what I worked through when I met with the small group of advisory committee members is with the request to extend the approval of this document till after the risk mapping was done is, so that's the end of June. So I suggested that we reach out to the public again, keep the public commenting period open till the end of June, and then close it there and then work on another draft. Probably have another meeting of the advisory committee to get their input on that draft. What that's going to involve, what I would like to do is resend out some of those survey questions, specifically more about what specific projects the community members want to see in their areas. I think those were the most important. There's a project list that we want to incorporate into the document that is not, that we haven't had any real input on. Some of the projects from the old CWPPs have been carried over, but the specific projects for the communities that's not been populated yet. Infrastructure, where people want to see defensible space around their community centers. If there's any historic structures in the area that they want, do they need some extra defensible space on their evacuation routes, that type of thing. Those specific projects is what we want to hear from the public. So I want to send out those questions again to the public and get more specific response. I did get some responses that I can use in the current survey. A lot of it was much too vague, so I think people were not clear on what I was asking. So in this, when I send it out again, I want to be much more specific about what I'm asking. Use those responses to populate the project table that we're going to have. And then obviously we have to prioritize that for if we get grant money or grant money is available, where will that grant money go first? Also, I want to ask the community to take a look at that goals, objectives, policies, tasks table. Really take a look at it. That is, I think, the most important part of the CWPP. All the information, the background information, that's important fluff. It's fluff, though. The really important part of it is that table that's in there, and they need to respond to that, and that is what I want feedback on. And from my advisory committee members, I've had very little response from the advisory committee members on that table as well. So those are the two things I really want to do in the future outreach. There's 2 months, May and June, that people can respond back to that. So I think that will be plenty of time to get some good responses.
Thank you, Inga. And I think one concern that I heard Commissioner Ojero mention was the documenting the reasons why changes are made. Will that be in the plan, or is that able to be put into the plan?
I can do that a little bit. There's one of the appendices does go into that a little bit as to, what projects were done, what have been completed, what were dropped off. Some of them just were never completed and never moved forward at all. So I can be a little bit clearer in that appendix, why things were being removed.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Ojo, a follow-up?
Yeah, one other follow-up, and that is that one of the notable absences in terms of participation in the development of the CWPP and in the review to date is the tribes. And I want to know whether you've reached out to the Confederated Tribes of Siletz or Grand Ronde specifically. They've lived on these landscapes for time immemorial, and especially when it comes to prescribed fire, that was their management mode, and it's a gap. So I would like to see some reach out.
I have not done that to date, no, but I definitely can.
All right, and I did see the question in the packet was, does BOC concur with delaying finalizing per ODF's request? We've already heard from Commissioner Ojo and Commissioner Malones that they concur with that. I too concur, and I thank you for the opportunity to be able to say I concur, because I love saying that. Thank you. Please continue. Is there more that you would need to update us on this, or?
So obviously the state's going into a lot of rulemaking. Actually, this afternoon, the DLCD is having a community engagement meeting on their wildfire stakeholder group. So that's all this afternoon. And then they have some more, I think next week and the week after as also. So that's DLCD is working on updates. The Office of the State Fire Marshal is working on updates. Obviously, Department of Forestry is working on updates. I think everyone currently is waiting on the wildfire risk map to be done. And then the fire marshal, the Office of the Fire Marshal and DLCD will then finalize their parts of it towards the end of the year. The WUI definition, they worked through all of that, but I believe it has not yet been fully adopted. Perhaps Leo or Michael can speak further to that. But they have basically agreed to what that definition will be. So that needs to be incorporated into the document. All those comments that I received in March and April need to be incorporated. I did receive some very good feedback, and also the to-date responses to the surveys will need to be incorporated into the project table, and some of the items will need to, there's some very nice graphs if I can get them to work in the CWPP. That would be very nice to have in the table. I can share my screen. Perhaps not. It's not letting me share the screen.
Well, while you're doing that, Michael, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, so the definition of WUI, to my understanding, that has been accepted and finalized. That had to get done first prior to the fire risk map being updated through OSU. Because like I said earlier, defining or outlining the WUI areas as part of this new risk map is part of the criteria and requirements for it. So we should be able to get that new WUI definition to Inga while we wait for the map to get finalized.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And it looks like the screen is working.
Yep. I have a link to, I have bookmarked all of the ODF and DLCD and my fire marshal website. So I'm trying to keep up on all of the new things that are coming through daily. So these, this was the survey. This was the responses to the survey, and some of the questions we asked were, what is the current level of wildfire risk to the following? And one was to the property on which you reside. the property surrounding your property within 1,000 feet, the community in which you live, critical facilities in your area, and critical infrastructure. Most people think that there's a moderate risk on properties in which they reside, and but a higher risk for surrounding properties, moderate risk to the community, not much risk to critical facilities, and critical infrastructure, also moderate risk. Are areas prepared for wildfire? This was also to your property, other properties. It's basically the same thing. The community, critical facilities, and critical infrastructure. As you can see, this somewhat was the majority response on that. So I'm not really sure. I guess people are feeling fairly confident that we are prepared, but obviously somewhat doesn't mean yes, we are prepared. What factors do you think add to the most wildfire risk in your community? So the top one was single road access. As we know, a lot of people are concerned about evacuation routes. The next one was too much development in the urban interface. After that, it was the lack of community preparedness. Again, that's like goes back to the question: how prepared do you think folks are in adjacent properties adjacent to you? So a lack of community preparedness. Limited water for fighting fires. Steep topography, weather patterns, and a limited response for wildfire suppression. I think the limited response, that's really more of an education component to explain to the community what is available out there as far as our fire defense boards, our rural fire departments, and how prepared they are to respond. What wildfire preparedness measures are you currently using? Most everyone is doing yard preparations. Some people are practicing evacuation, and some people are working on creating a water source. So all of the, and then what wildfire preparedness measures would you like more help with? A lot of these involve funding requirements, so that will be difficulty is finding funding sources. Most have wanted education assistance, and then assistance creating defensible space. I didn't want to send this to you ahead of time because there's a lot of information here, but I certainly am prepared to get this to you so you can look through all of it with more detail. So anyway, this needs to be incorporated into the plan as well, the responses that I received. And I'm sure I'll receive a lot more responses and a lot more specifics, hopefully, in the next go round.
All right, questions and comments for Inga, Commissioner Malone.
This isn't just for Inga, but a chart on page 67 of our packet got my attention, just 10-year trends. And I didn't do the math, but from not quite 100% increase in acres burned in Oregon in the two periods in comparison, and just wondering between your, and this could be a question for Greg also, just community response when you were developing the 2016 plan versus the response that you're getting developing the current plan. I guess the basic question is, are people more aware, more concerned about wildfire and what we need to do about it now than they were 5 years ago.
I would say definitely, yes. Just having to deal with the smoke issues, even though the fires were not in our community, we had to deal with that smoke, and people were definitely aware of it. Yes. I don't know what the response was in the prior years, creating and updating this document. I know they were able to have smaller community meetings and obviously in person that we hadn't been able to do, but the responses that I have received were very, very good. I think if we were able to put out more, do some more public outreach and get people more aware of this, that there is interest out there. They just need to be aware that this is happening, that they can look at this and give us comments.
Yep, that's definitely good to know, and that's always the challenge. How do you let people know what they don't know? But we
Yes.
do love public input and public feedback, so hoping to get as much of that as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? All right. Any other information on this topic?
No, I don't. Greg, you have anything?
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for coming and joining us today and sharing that information with us. We appreciate it. And I have a great afternoon. And before we move to the next agenda item, I will call for a 5-minute break. So we'll see you back at 10:07. and ready to go. Next agenda item 4.3, discuss greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And I do see we have an hour scheduled for this. Our public hearing is scheduled for time certain at 11 a.m. So if we get to 11 a.m., we will need to pause, potentially move to the public hearing, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
And with that, Sean, please show us what you got.
Sounds great, Commissioner. Thank you so much. We'll try and speed things up. Thank you. As always, it's the most wonderful time of the year, our annual presentation on our greenhouse gas inventory, as well as our climate action plan. Before I get going too much with introductions, if I could be made presenter, that would be much appreciated. First and foremost, want to make introductions. Jen Brown, you see, as well as our, their cameras aren't on, but we have our climate action coordinator, Michael Gardner Brown, on with us, and Brian Barley. Thank you. Brian Barley, there he is. And Brian Barley, our climate action intern. I'm realizing for the first time our entire program is all together. We're taking over. This is great. Just as real quick, every year since 16, it's been wonderful to have a climate action intern that usually starts in the fall, goes through June. That is Brian this year. Michael was a previous intern. Because of COVID, we had an opportunity after 2 years of him being the intern to bring him on. So he is now a part-time coordinator. So before we dive in, I did want to just say one thing. I say this every year because I mean it every year and every day. Our program is very blessed to have your support and the support of so much of the staff. The inventory part started well before I started in 15. This is Chris Bielenberg, former facilities manager, Tally, Rebecca Taylor, built this before I even came in. And then IT was very incredibly helpful to turn this onto an online database so that facilities can use it as a management tool. It's just been wonderful. And then the climate action plan, this all started with me reaching out to different staff and bringing it together. So I just want to be crystal clear, not every jurisdiction has this. And so commissioners, I really want to thank you and Joe. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to provide to you today. So with that, I'm going to move you over here to this screen, and then we'll start with our presentation. It's going to take me 1 second to swap, and there we go. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about our greenhouse gas inventory and our climate action plan. As a heads up, we're going to kind of divide and conquer. I'm going to be a little bit more running this presentation. On May 17th, in 2 weeks, Jen is going to come back and get into more of the climate action plan. So for today, I'm going to do a quick overview of all the activities that happened last year, which were many. Review the inventory. One of the new sources is commuting, and it's a lot. So we want to give you a deep dive into that. Some of the many challenges for us to achieve our goal in order to set you all up for the presentation on May 17th. So that's the intent of what's going on today. And please, you're over here, but if you have any questions, raise your hand and I will stop and answer anything or any issues. Just so we're all clear, this is the official, this is our official goal. We need to be half of 2010 levels by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. This was a goal the commissioners you adopted back in actually February of 2020. So the major activities of last year.
John, can I just clarify? If you are trying to screen share right now, we don't see it.
Oh, why isn't it? My apologies. Thank you for stopping me.
That's okay.
Nope, that's not it. That was weird. 1 second. Thank you. How is that?
I think that's it.
Okay, because you were there before. All right, sorry about that. Let's see. Okay. So we have, this is our goal of 2050. Let me see. This was working so awesomely about 5 seconds ago. So what we have is, we kind of separate these two into an inventory aspect and the climate action plan section. So we have our, one is, if you remember from last year, we have a brand new inventory. We moved away from the EPA and moved into a separate inventory. And so this is the first year we've actually updated that. And so now we are just finding little things, little additions, which is great to have Michael, who we created that with us to work us way through. So we just kind of fine tuned as we went along. And as you will see, we added sources to the inventory itself. In parallel, we had an internal review and analysis for our climate action plan with Lilia's leadership. Jen and I instituted our expertise for climate action opportunities, as well as Resource Efficiency Committee and other staff members to really highlight and to identify additional things we can do. And Jen's going to dive into that in 2 weeks. We also had an external review with a consultant that we had, Good Company, down in Eugene. And as well as they conducted a benefit cost analysis of kind of the biggest bang for the buck for us to reduce our greenhouse gas. And that will be shared in a couple weeks. I just want to let you know those are, that was a full year in about 1 minute. So there was a lot that went on last year. So let's dive into the actual inventory. So what we have on our inventory is, one, we want to be crystal clear with people, if they're on Facebook or whatever, that this is Benton County government. This is not Monroe or Adair Village. This is our staff, our facilities, our fleet. It has been tracked since 2010. And I want to stop there just for a quick second, because when we say track from 2010, as we add these sources on, we need to calculate with as much methodological rigor and academic integrity as we can to estimate what those were in 2010. Anything to do with staff, our fleet, anything. What is omitted in there is anything that was brought on since 2010, like Sunset in 2013, Calipuya last year, 2 years ago, solar panels at the fairgrounds, etc. So that's kind of tricky when we add these sources on to make sure that we are anchored as our goal is in 2010. Our current sources are utilities, electricity, fuel, gas, waste, and water, and we'll dive into those. And our two new sources that were put into the current inventory are refrigerants and commuting. I'm going to dive into each one as we move forward. And we also have two new utility sources in general. That's Calipuya, obviously. If you remember from last year, we actually brought on Calipuya early in 2020. Pfizer, the company that was in there, had servers that were basically powering North America. I was actually called by Pacific because our electricity shot up. That one facility was a third of our entire utilities. And so we came to you last year. We made the decision to bring Calipuya on when Pfizer was out, and it became normalized. It was just so skewing everything. It wasn't useful. And then also the waste compactor at fairgrounds. So those are the two new sources. Okay, so let's get into the actual emission. This is our net emissions from 2010 and updated with 2021 data. And I'm going to slow down and kind of walk us all through this. First, we're going to get to the whole net issue in the next couple of slides. But for right now, let's just anchor what this is. Number one, all of this is metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Just to make sure everyone's aware, carbon dioxide is not our only greenhouse gas. Methane is far more impactful than carbon dioxide, but science can normalize all of it so we just have one number, and that's what we have. So these are metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So again, this is 2010. This is our anchor. Fairly flat. We also brought in, when we get to electricity, you'll see far more bringing Sunset on. Slight upgrade as we go in, and obviously this is COVID. We dropped 1,000 tons in 1 year because of COVID. If you recall from last year, it was across the board a 20% reduction in all of our major facilities, except LEB, law enforcement building. That went down 6%, but that was 6% fully staffed, which is a testament to facilities to continually reducing our resource use, even fully staffed in that facility. So that was pretty impressive. And this uptick is now us staff coming back to work. And we're going to dive into each utility to see how that's affected. Now, yes, we dropped 1,000 tons, and that's fantastic and all good. The challenge we have, though, is this is our goal. So we dropped 1,000 tons, and we're still 1,300 tons shy. And so we're going to dive into each and every one, and we're trying to set the stage for the 17th just to understand how challenging this is going to get to achieve our greenhouse gas goal. I'm also looking for questions. If you have any, just raise your hand. Next is talking about what net means. So we are now in a wonderful position to really understand what net is. So in our actual inventory that we developed, it is a total usage minus our generation, utility generation, in this case electricity, and offsets. The intuitive issue is that they're all electricity based, but they are their own categories. And the reason why we track all three is that we need to reduce all three. And so this is a really nice demonstration of from 2019, we really start to see a separation from the amount of solar generation we're having, which we'll get to in a second, and the Blue Sky program in which we are offsetting those emissions. Interesting, one of the things that's behind the scenes in our inventory is that we have two utilities and they have different carbon intensity mixes. Consumer is much less. You will see a very small gap here. Those are the solar panels at Fairgrounds. But since Fairgrounds uses consumer, which is very clean, you really don't see a huge separation. This is coming from, as we get solar arrays at Pacific Power. Pacific Power is a little bit more carbon intensive. So for the first time, we're really starting to see that separation. And we'll get to this later, but we have 5 solar arrays fully cranking as of next year. This is going to only increase. So it's really critical. And I think that this graph does a little better job of looking at how we need to address all three. We need to be reducing our total utility. We need to be increasing our solar generation, and whatever's left, we need to offset. And right now it's mainly blue sky, it's all blue sky, but in the future, we're going to need other sources to start addressing this in electricity. And we're going to end this whole conversation about how we're going to have to get off the grid. But I just want to set the tone when we say net. These are the first few couple years we've really started to see that gap and having to look at each one individually. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's get into usage. Again, so from, when we look at utilities, we look exclusively at usage, and then we come back, kind of like your taxes. You start with your income, and then you start looking at your deductibles. So we're looking at all the usage, and then we'll come back with how we take things away. So this is our usage from 2021. Again, electricity, commuting, and fleet are the big ones. I think a really cool graph that Brian created was this, which shows kind of the same thing, but it just really demonstrates that fuel, commuting, and electricity are the major things we need to focus on, and then everything else combined is less than 9%. I want to be crystal clear before we go any further, if anyone listening. Water, landfill waste, gas, these are critical environmental issues. Please do not interpret it any other way. Today, we're looking at their carbon impact. And so just want to make sure that I'm not dismissing those in any way as environmental challenges. Today, we're looking at carbon.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Could you please clarify for water how that is a emission?
It's the electricity used to pump water.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, unfortunately, no one on the planet actually pays for water. We pay for the transport of water or the distribution of water. And that's where that is. And so, Michael, we use the coefficient from that electrical grid to calculate what. Commissioner Rozier, did I see your hand up?
Yes, I have an analogous question for the landfill waste. Is that the greenhouse gases for trucking the waste to the landfill, or does that include our portion of the methane generated by the landfill, or how's that calculated?
It's at the landfill itself. You are correct. We're going to end the conversation with production, with consumption and purchasing and some of the life cycle costs. It is not the life cycle costs of the things that we're throwing away. It is at the landfill and those processes that we get from DEQ. Okay. This is our usage kind of over time. Again, we can start to see it. We're going to get into each and every one of these as we move forward, but just to kind of give you an idea of where they all rank since 2010. So let's dive in. So let's start with electricity. We start to see this one, you can really start to see sunset come on. We were moving into that, I think it was a forestry building before we owned it. We were moving in and then we purchased it. And so we fully moved in, and you're talking to Chris Bielenberg, who was Paul Walsinger's predecessor. That's where you start to see the uptick. And then we're kind of going around, bouncing around, a few more people coming in as staff, and then COVID. So there we are dropping back down, and then we're going back up. I want to focus on this because I really want to give Paul and facilities their major props. This going up is because of us purchasing Calapooya. I want to give you some numbers. Jen is going to talk about in a couple of weeks some of the specific projects, but it's just as far as the numbers. From 2020 to 2021, Avery went down 3,200 kilowatt hours, that's 2%. Courthouse went down 13,000 kilowatt hours, that's 7%. Law enforcement building went down another 2%. Again, they've never really left. So they went down 6% last 2 years ago, 2% this year. Sunset went down 2%. In total, our major facilities went down 46,000 kilowatt hours. It's just that Calapooya brought on 62,000 kilowatt hours. So that's really why this went up. If we take Calapooya out, this continues to go down. This is in the face of people coming back to work. So this is us continually hounding on reducing our utility usage and then getting into solar generation and blue sky. So, and again, Jen's going to get into more of the specific projects that Paul instituted to reduce the electricity use. Any question? Okay. Next is fleet fuel. So this is really interesting. I want to say again, many thanks to Paul Walsinger Facilities and Keith Nicholson and Fleet. We meet with them always a week or two before we present to you to start to get an understanding of where those numbers are coming from. In 2019, Keith, Fleet instituted faster the new fleet database system. In talking with him last year, previous years, and again in this year, we just don't have a lot of faith in that old system. It was atrocious. Every time he would run it, he'd get new numbers. So we're not dismissing these, but yeah, there's just a lot of fluctuation. And this really hits on 2016 in the aggregate. So just kind of want to buffer. Now you can go onto the B or intranet and get any data you want. It's much cleaner. I also want to stop for a second and thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Joe, for instituting this to provide the funds for Fleet to have these new database systems. I think sometimes if in a CIP budget committee meeting or something, it gets isolated to the actual users. Prior to that system, and Michael can attest to this himself, it would take weeks for us to enter Fleet into that database, into our inventory. Brian is the beneficiary of it now taking hours. And so that is the power. So in addition to all these other databases that we're creating, IT, Public Works, wherever, it has a profound ripple effect into other staff. So I just want to showcase to you that these investments that we're making is not just isolated into the department that using. So that's Fleet. Yes.
Sean?
Yeah.
Back to Fleet. Previous to 2019, is there any way to get those numbers more accurate if you average all those years, or do a 5-year average? Does that help any?
Because it's only a 9-year span, yes, you could kind of just draw an average there and get rid of the bouncing. the bottom line is we really just care about 752. I mean, our goal is to be half of 2010. So regardless of what's happening between all of these numbers, the bottom line is by 2030, we need to be at whatever that is, 375 or something. And so all of this bouncing is just more trend line to provide our management fleet and facility managers, hey, something is wrong. Last year we had a car that apparently drove 880,000 miles. That's the moon and back 3 times. It's a data check. It's those kinds of things. But yeah, I see your point. But in actuality, our real ultimate goal is to make sure whatever year we're in is getting closer and closer to half of it.
Great. Thank you.
Of course, of course. Natural gas, a wonderful success story. Several things that Paul and facilities have done to decrease our natural gas emissions, much cleaner boilers, et cetera. Jen's going to list them all out in a couple of weeks, but this is really a downward trend to address our natural gas emissions. Making sure no one has any questions. Water. So water is, because it's so small, again, incredibly important environmental issue. When we get into carbon, it's really the y-axis and it's very small. Little fluctuations have a huge impact. In talking to Paul earlier this week, this is one of his top priorities, to start looking at irrigation, monthly tracking to make sure that this is being addressed, not just for carbon, but water usage. Clearly, as we move toward climate adaptation, water is going to be even more at a premium. And so just to make sure that this is a treasured resource and try to reduce as much as possible. And this is also a little bit of a data tracking issue. So we're working the best we can. Landfill waste. Getting to your question, Commissioner Ojiro, this is the landfill waste carbon impacts there. We know we have dramatic reductions because of the compactors, but we brought on the compactor at Fairgrounds. So the compactor at Avery was brought on in 15. In order to backcast, we used FTE averages. The compactor at Fairgrounds is different. That is mainly the RV park and events there. This is, I would strongly believe this is strongly underrepresenting because we didn't have fairs for the past 3 years. And we need to either figure out how that was impacting with how trash from the fair and other major events. The fairgrounds came as a shock to me when I learned 3 or 4 years ago. They have 11 to 1,200 events every year. That's 3 events a day. So there was a far more trash that was being used than today. So what we put a note in the inventory is to say that in 3 years, when fairs and we get it, whatever the new normal is, to kind of do what you were saying, Commissioner Malone, go back and average out those years and have this be more appropriate to what we think it would be, considering we haven't had the trash generation because of COVID for the past two years.
And one clarifying, yes, question, the significance of the compactor, does that just have to do with the amount of waste that it goes through, or is that the energy that generated, or both?
That is what is happening at the landfill, and we get the coefficient from DEQ. Yeah, this is not life cycle. This isn't transporting. It is just what's happening as the waste emits the carbon from there. I will say that we are trying to capture that. We know that the compactor use had a significant reduction in just the amount of times the Republic drives around from our facilities for our trash, but we can't really calculate that. But that is behind the scenes significant data.
And do we have 2 compactors? Is there still one at Avery, or do we just? Okay.
Yes. So the compactor at Avery is mainly for our waste countywide, as well as natural areas and parks. Also, in talking to Public Works, at roads, pick up stuff on our roads, that also goes in that compactor. The compactor at Fairgrounds is far more RV waste and things generated specifically at the fairgrounds.
Okay, and then, so Jen, did you want to weigh in on that? And then Commissioner Ojiro, I see your hand.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to yours, Nancy, and that is, how does compacting the trash reduce methane emissions or carbon, the metric tons of carbon equivalent?
Go ahead, Jen.
I just wanted to, I think Commissioner Wise's answers to your first question and maybe clarifies what the compactors do is allows a really accurate representation of how much waste, because the compactors are weighed and we're billed on the weight, whereas prior, all of our trash, all of our waste was picked up similar to how it is done in your home service, which is you can put out 1 pound of waste, 10 pounds of waste, it just picks up. So we don't really have an accurate calculation. And how you calculate the emissions from it is based on the weight. So we have really accurate data now that we have, since having a compactor at Avery, because the majority of waste gets moved over to the Avery compactor. And with Fairgrounds now, we have a much more accurate of the whole operational waste from the county.
And that, exactly as Jen said, that weight is where the coefficient from DEQ comes from, just per pound of carbon emissions. But again, that does not get into life cycle.
Commissioner Ojo, did that answer your question?
Yeah, so it's not really it hasn't been a reduction strategy, it's been a data improvement strategy. And so thank you.
Yeah, that was the big difference. Thanks, Jen. Okay. My favorite graph of all time, refrigerants. As I had shared with you, we do the very best we can to backcast to 2010. Now, refrigerants are those, it's the release of chemicals that are going into the air leaking from an HVAC system for air conditioning or just emitting. That also has an impact on our carbon emissions. A very, very, very small amount. It's there, it's part of the inventory. In talking with Paul and Facilities and Keith and Fleet, we just haven't tracked it. So it's not like we have receipts somewhere that we can just go and find. So that's why the only backcasting we have is to keep the same number. Now, again, it's 1.5 tons. And looking at Corvallis, who has far more facilities than we have, it is 0.2% of their inventory. So we will continue to, and talking to Paul and Keith, both can track in the future to get a better idea, and we might be able to backcast. But for now, this is coming from refrigerants from facilities. So again, it's a ton. It's not 7 tons. Any other questions? Okay, so let's get into the bigger topic as far as our source. So commuting is our new source. As you saw, it is a significant one. So how we're basing this as our methodology is we conducted commute surveys last year and this year. Last year, we asked staff, what did you do before COVID and what did you do after COVID? So what we assume is that what you did before COVID, that is 2019 and before, was consistent back to 2010. And the data kind of bears that out when you look at the parking lots and things. And then moving forward, we're going to continue to fine tune the survey to capture how people are commuting or not commuting to work moving forward. That's where that 2021 survey. We also assume that non-respondents act like respondents. So last year we had an 80% response rate. This year it was in the mid-60s. So that gap between our total staff and those who responded, we assume they act in the aggregate as the same. And so I just want to make sure that's our methodology of how we actually calculated our emissions. Lastly, in the last year's survey, people commented that, hey, I drive an electric, hey, I drive a hybrid. And so we calculated those efficiencies in miles per gallon and included that into the survey moving forward. So before we get too much further, I want to make sure everyone's no questions on the methodology. Okay. So this is our commuting. So we go back, we kind of see a dip. We used national average miles per gallon as the assumption of the average car driving to and from work. Again, this is to and from work. which is why you kind of see this dip. But as we start adding more and more staff, we're starting to see the uptick. Then obviously we drop down to COVID, and now we're kicking back up as people come back to work. So that is the trend line. And again, that's 1,000 tons. This is a significant increase in our inventory. Another way of looking at this, oh, I should say, the hybrid and electricity, we have 9 electric vehicles. I'm sorry, respondents stated that they have 9 electric vehicles and 31 staff responded that they have a hybrid. With those savings, that was about 70 tons reduced, which is pretty cool. Commissioner Ortega?
That assumes that everyone is using blue sky and that it's non-fossil fuel based electricity.
That is exactly right. So this was actually, we did a lot. We used the net for the average car national miles per gallon. Brian researched all electric and hybrid vehicles and came up with an average. The consultant that you're going to hear about in 2 weeks is also have their coefficients, and basically it's 50 miles to the gallon for a hybrid, 100 miles to the gallon for electric. It sounds ridiculous to say 100 miles to the gallon for an electric car, but it's the best we can do. And Commissioner Ortega, you nailed it. If you have a solar panel that you're being, or blue sky or something that you are feeding, you are, except for the construction of the car itself, essentially off the grid. Absolutely correct. But yes, that's what it is assuming. Okay. So what we're really focusing in on when we get to commuting is miles saved by not commuting. So I want to kind of walk this through. When we're looking at the total miles, the total potential, we ask every staff, how far away do you live from work? How many days do you drive to work? Or how many days do you work? And that's the total of potential miles driven. In 2019, that number was 93%. That is only 7% of our staff did not drive to work. Now that could be telework, 410s, it's that kind of thing, which is, yeah, not much. When COVID hit, that went down to 36%. That is 36% less miles driven by our staff to get to work. And then now we're starting to see an uptick. Now it is back to 26%. Just for data consistency, all 3 of these assume everyone's driving the same car. Otherwise, the hybrid and electric get skewed. So all 3 of these are apples to apples to apples. The trend, though, is what we're looking at, that we're having more staff, more miles are being driven, and we're kind of creeping back to where we were in January of 2020. And so what you're going to be hearing in 2 weeks are how do we address this? We do have, you as policymakers have significant impact on our telework, 410s, other ways of us, because I should say electricity is somewhat of a shell game. And what I mean by that is I have my monitor, my county monitor here. Most people were at home. So whether or not you are working at home or working in a county facility, the earth doesn't know that. There's still electricity being emitted into the air. And if you're interested, if you're a geek like me, you start looking at how organizations are kind of seeing how they can capture that and bring that into their inventory. Commuting is not. You don't drive, there's no emissions going out. And so that's why this is such an important one. That and the fact that there's not really an offset to this. Unless we get Star Trek transporters, there's no way around this. And so that's why this is really critical to start looking at, not only do we need to look at how we can reduce miles total through certain whatever incentives, but also making sure that staff have an option not to drive to work. So this is a really big one there that we're going to return to in a couple of weeks to see how we can address that. Any questions? Okay. So now we're going to move to, now that we have commuting, now we want to look at what the data is telling us about how can we actually achieve our goal. And the only way that we're really going to do this is to get off the grid. And the analysis that good companies will provide later on is bears that out as well. So as I said, we need to reduce our total use, but we also need to start getting off the grid as far as solar generation. So this is our solar generation for kilowatt hours in Benton County. This uptick is the solar array at Fairgrounds. It started in the summer of 2011, so 2012 was the first full year that we start going. So from 2012 to 2019, it's only the Fairgrounds. Then we kick up, and this is a solar array over at the health center building, at the health services building near Chintimini. And this upkick is that facility in Calapooya. Now, when we start having a full year of those two, plus the law enforcement building that Commissioner West, you were at last week, and then the two health center, the Fairgrounds, LEB, the two health centers in Calapooya, those 5, we're going to start seeing that really go up. And especially since it's offsetting Pacific Power, those are going to be significant savings in the next 2 or 3 years when all 5 arrays are fully functional for a full year. So we're very excited about this upward trend. Getting back to this graph, we just want to showcase that again, we are going to be reducing our electricity use, increasing our solar generation, and purchasing as much blue sky as possible, if not all. So if we do all that, now we start getting into the numbers. Our total net emissions for last year was 3,142 tons. If we can get rid of and get off the grid, we're at 2,232 tons, which is great, except for one small thing, we need to be at 1661, which is a deficit of 571 tons, as it is right now. Coming out of COVID, commuting is still somewhat downward savings from there. That is a very, very challenging number to achieve. We also have natural gas. That's twice as natural gas. I mean, this is not small. And so what we're trying to do is set the stage for just how much we need to address our policies, our practices, all this to reduce. Because not only is this not warm and fuzzy, it's actually going to get much more as we start adding current facilities. So the next stage for us is to start adding facilities that we know we're already emitting that is not in the inventory. Again, as I said at the beginning, this all came from Public Works. So the majority of the facilities that we look at are from Public Works and Fairgrounds. When I explored Natural Hills and Parks and other departments, I was told to go to that department. With the reorg in finance, I found out a couple months ago that it is coming directly through them, and now we have a central source. And so what Jennifer Fenn and Tally had said that they are going to train Michael, Brian, and I in Munis and in the utility tracker to update that to bring in. Now, again, it's just going to lift the entire bar up. We're just bringing what we already know we're emitting. It's just not being captured right now. Brian did an early assessment that could be between 200 and 300 tons. But again, the whole thing is going to lift up. So it's not, and it's all electricity at this point. So I just want to say we're adding to the current facilities. Another thing that I want to say is this is not inclusive. The next 3 or 4 years are going to be interesting. We know we have a crisis center coming in, so that's a new facility. Unsure, I talked with Paul last week, unsure of what's happening with the BOC facility. We have the bond bill next year, which has impacts on all kinds of facilities throughout the county. And so as we add these on or shift, that's going to have a profound impact on our total inventory. Again, if we sell one, it's the opposite. That comes off our inventory. So there's a lot of moving parts. And I should say, in addition to Commissioner Ojero on that topic, in the past, you have asked about emissions per square foot and per FTE. There was so much volatility this year with bringing on buildings and not, and there's also a discrepancy with our FTE number between what we get from finance and from the survey. It was too complex, and this is another thing we need to be fine-tuning for next year. And so hopefully we can get that back in the coming years once things kind of settle down. It was just too intense this year. So then we're also exploring additional sources. One is reimbursed travel miles. This has kind of been on our radar for a few years now, but just trying to figure out how to capture that. So when commissioners and directors and others do lots of travel, you put in how many miles, but it's not being, the amount of miles is not being captured. That could be profound, because that's basically fleet-ish. When you are driving on your job, this isn't a commute thing, this is a fleet thing. So that is a big one. Non-fleet travel would be air, train, something. This isn't you're driving a fleet vehicle to Salem for a meeting. This is going to San Antonio for a conference or something like that. Air travel, train, all those. That's going to be kind of complex to see how much into the rabbit hole we go, but that is something we're going to be investigating over the next year. And the real big one is the purchasing consumption. When we purchase something that has an embedded carbon impact, and our inventory has that category that we need to start investigating and exploring. It's very difficult. The methodology is interesting, we'll say, but it is 25% of Corvallis's, and it is something so that we can have an understanding. Hey, when you click for reams of paper or pens, or even the purchasing a car that has carbon emissions embedded into that process that we need to capture and account for. So those are the three that we're going to be exploring over the next year on the inventory. And always continue to fine tuning. You've been hearing me say this the whole presentation. And the best part is to start developing these analysis tools, especially like on commuting, as I was trying to say. There's different ways that we can say, if this happens, what would be the impact? And this is leading into the conversation we have with Good Company. Want to stop there? There was a lot of information I just went through. Any questions on that? Okay. So in 2 weeks, like I said, these are the numbers. Jen will revisit some of these numbers to kind of tease your brain a little bit to remember today. The big ones are the many accomplishments. I've alluded to them, both in fleet and in facilities, and accomplishments and progress on our climate action plan. We were asking for you to adopt the climate action plan, which has never really been done officially. Also, Good Company will be presenting next week or 2 weeks on their analysis and their list of recommendations, and then we'll lay out our next steps for 2022. So yeah, that was a lot of data, graphs, apologies, but just wanted to make sure that you have all of the information and data that you have, so that when we revisit this in a couple weeks, you have the information you need. Any questions?
Comments or questions? Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, really appreciate this effort, John, and just in the 3 years I've been here, trying to refine the data and get it more accurate. And I guess the main question is how to make sure all our departments know this information, and somehow I see a competition who can reduce their usage the most, or just getting some, okay, we have the information, and I realize Jen in a couple of weeks will talk to some of this, but this is all good stuff. We have a pretty good idea where we're at now and where we need to be, and just how to do better at engaging all our staff and departments in this critical effort.
Before I'll prime Jen if she wants to say something about rec and working with department directors, but I'm not speaking for Joe, but we usually go out after we present to you commissioners to management team, and Joe has said that in the coming month or two that we will do that again to make sure that they have the information. So yeah, absolutely. This is on the web. After we're done, I'll put this on the public domain as well as internal. I see a lot of resource efficiency committee members here, so just making sure that staff and leadership know that. Jen, I didn't know if you wanted to just quickly comment on your working with directors on things like commuting and some of the work as a primer for next 2 weeks from now?
Yes, so we'll talk about it more in 2 weeks. Thanks, Sean. But every department this year completed a climate action planning checklist. So really going through these different source areas and sort of checking off different actions that every department should be doing. So everybody's getting more and more. Part of the goal of myself and Sean is really to make sure that all departments are aware and can participate where they can. Obviously, there are some things that really fall strictly to public works, like our facilities, but departments can really make some other choices, and we're trying to sort of increase that awareness.
Great, and I was encouraged that one of our steps that we're taking to reorganize our finance efforts and centralize that, and that helps with this effort. So I appreciate that piece of information. So thank you.
Can I just real quick on your first comment, Commissioner Malone, you had talked about the fine tuning of the inventory. I am not going to break my arm patting myself on the back, because it was me and it was Michael Gardner Brown and Jen and I's compatriot with Corvallis, Scott did that. If you remember, we completely redid our inventory. We had good company in Eugene review that inventory, and I'm very happy to share with you, commissioners, that they said that it was one of the best ones they've seen built in-house. There's a lot of hard work, and we are going to fine tune. And I know that doesn't always sound great to the public, that we don't have all the answers out of the gate. But to have that level of specificity and to have scenario building capabilities and all that, it just takes a little while for us to get our feet wet and tested. And so this was the first year we really took it for a test drive. So yeah, we just wanted to share that with you.
I saw Commissioner Ogerle's hand, and then I also saw Joe Kirby's hand.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you all, our climate and resource efficiency team, because this is a huge step forward, I think, in terms of being comprehensive and being realistic in terms of our emissions. And clearly, the county is only one small piece. County as an institution is one small piece of what we emit as Benton County, and it's only a drop in the bucket of where we need to get to in terms of climate mitigation. So I'm really hoping that once we have a new PIO on board, we can also do a lot more community education and talk about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and those and decision tools or analysis tools that we may eventually have, allow people to play with them and understand the effect of their own decisions. So thank you. This is great progress.
Thank you. Joe, did I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you. To answer Commissioner Malone's question relative to the department directors and the other elected officials, we will be having Sean and Jen come to a future leadership team meeting. It's likely going to be the first part of June. We wanted to get through these presentations with the commissioners both today and then again on May 17th, more specific to our climate action plan. So additional information will be forthcoming to the other elected officials and department directors. Also, to the point of teleworking, or in this case, our commuting survey, I did ask Jen to take the information from the commuting survey and to meet with each one of the departments directors individually to make sure that they understood their survey results. Because I do think, as Sean indicated, we're going to have to focus on reducing our commuting miles. One way in which we'll be doing that is through our teleworking policy that's currently going through our Policy Oversight Committee. But it is important that each department understand what the habits and practices are within their department so that we can use teleworking and the reduction of commuting miles as one of those criteria or areas that we have control over and we can reduce. So stay tuned for more dialogue in those areas.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions or comments for Sean and team? Sean?
If not, if not, two things. One, just want to recognize the great work of Michael and Brian, and thanking them for all their great work for the past year. And I think you have 90 seconds. So thank you, Commissioner, and I hope we kind of got that through before 11. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate your time and all of your work. And Brian and Michael, thank you for being here, and thanks for all your good work.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good afternoon. Commissioner Malone, oh, was that just a wave? Goodbye. Okay, great. And I actually misspoke. We just have to have the public hearing at 11 a.m. or after. It didn't have to be exactly at 11 a.m., but it all worked out well. Let's see. So this is my way of stalling for hopefully 1 minute until it clicks over to 11 so we can start the public hearing. And let's see, did we lose Commissioner Ojero or?
Commissioner Wise, just interjecting real quick, you could go ahead and start going through the proclamations if you wished that are identified on the agenda.
Sure. Yeah, we can do Proclamation 5.1 in the matter of proclaiming May 15th through 21st, 2022 as National Public Works Week. And my agenda says Gary Stockoff and Debbie Wayne.
Is Gary not there?
Let's see. I'm looking. I do see Gary's on, but his camera is off.
Okay.
Gary, are you with us? Maybe he just ran down the hallway real quick.
He was supposed to be there to read it, Commissioner.
I mean, so depending on what your preference is, we could always, it's 11 a.m. We could go back to the public hearing, or we could move on to 5.2 and come back to this one. Vance, I saw you clicked on. Do you have an opinion?
My preference would be to go with the public hearing, simply because that's, I guess, more time dependent.
Perfect. All right. Well, we will go into the public hearing then, and we will come back to the proclamations. Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022 at 11 a.m. is the time set for the public hearing in the matter of amending Benton County Code Chapter 17 to update sale of tobacco regulations. All testimony, arguments, and evidence received during this public hearing must be directed towards the subject of the proposed code amendment. The hearing procedure will be as follows. 1, staff will present the staff report. 2, any member of the public wishing to present general testimony will be given the opportunity to speak. 3, testimony from any representative of any other governmental body. And number 4, staff response. Please try to avoid repetition if someone else has already expressed the same thoughts. It is perfectly acceptable to state that you agree with the statements of a previous speaker. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by this body, they must be formally placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, please submit the material to Erica Milo, who will make sure your evidence is properly taken care of. Erica, could you please put your email in the chat, just in case there's anyone who would like to email you documents. Finally, I will ask the board if any commissioner needs to declare any bias, conflict of interest, or ex parte contacts. And one clarifying question there, we did have Christina testify earlier, which was sort of related to this topic. So Vance, do we need to declare that as ex parte or?
We don't, but what I would suggest is, Erica, that we relocate her testimony to within the public hearing. I don't think she understood that her testimony was really probably more properly directed at the commissioners within the context of this hearing. And we can simply move that and make a note in our minutes that that testimony that she provided is considered by the board during the public hearing.
Perfect. And I will apologize for not making that more clear at the beginning of the meeting, and I will try to remember that for next time. And with that, we will open the public hearing, and we will start with the staff report. So I see Sarah, you are with us. Are you? And I see Andy.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes. Am I able to be heard okay?
I can hear you.
I appreciate all of your time today. And we do have a PowerPoint that just gives a 8 or 9 slide overview if that's helpful. Today's topic is the code update to Chapter 17 and also the related fee update for tobacco retail licensing. And I see I might be making the might become the presenter here. Just a moment. Okay, can this be seen?
I can see it.
Okay. So again, thank you for your time, and thank you to my directors, Sarah and Suzanne, for their work on this during my absence, and also Vance for his assistance with the code updates. Again, just to recap, last year, Oregon legislature passed Senate Bill 587, requiring all retailers selling tobacco products, including vaping products, to become licensed. And under this law, there were options to opt into the state program or to maintain an existing local tobacco retail license program, which Benton County has had for several years. We did take the decision to maintain our own local program for tobacco licensing. So the cities previously would operate their own license programs with parallel language. All of those cities have now come under one program, which will be facilitated by Benton County Health Department. We have a strong history of leadership in this region when it comes to tobacco prevention, working to prevent youth initiation of tobacco use, and maintaining our own local program will allow us the flexibility to strengthen the program down the road. So some of the ways that the program will be updated, aside from the code and the fee, which we'll get into in a moment, this will create a singular place for retailers to apply for new licenses or renew their licenses annually. We will also bring our enforcement standards up to those of the state, which include annual compliance inspections and also minor legal sales age inspections. And we will also update the code in terms of the fines schedule as for excuse me, for any violations. So the proposed annual fee increase will help to facilitate operations of the program. The new proposed fee is $560 compared to $35 previously, and this is in comparison to the state's program, which is $953. And again, these fees will go to cover outreach and education, communication materials. We've now set up a website on the health department, or a web page on the health department website where we will update information. We'll conduct in-store compliance inspections. As I mentioned, minimum legal sales age inspections, any complaints that are found against a retailer, and then remediation planning. And in order to do so, this will take, of course, staff time. So we estimate about 0.25 FTE for someone to conduct inspections and then also to hire temporary employees who are under 21 years of age for the minor legal sales age inspections. And this table provides a comparison to other jurisdictions. For example, the city of Eugene is retaining its tobacco retail license and increasing fees to cover the newly mandated inspections by the state. Clatsop County, another example. Multnomah County also has a very strong history of operating tobacco retail licensing and prevention. So again, our next steps here, today's meeting and going through the code and the fee, answer any questions. Again, we do have the web page live, and I can drop that link in the chat in just a moment. We have been communicating with retailers through mailed letters. Previously, we didn't have a full set of email addresses for every licensed retailer because the cities did things just a little bit differently, but we will collect those going forward for more streamlined communication. And here's our contact information. And I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any clarifying questions that are not deliberations? Seeing none, we will move to public testimony. Are there any members of the public who would like to testify today? If so, please put your name in the chat. And is there anyone who would like to testify that is unable to put their name in the chat? Commissioner Ojro?
I just have one clarifying question, and that is, and this may not be the right time for it, but we also have the fee schedule that is coming up as a separate agenda item. And my question is that in this code that we're looking at now, there's also a hearings fee. And I wanted to know whether we already have that hearings fee someplace else, or whether it also needs to be referred to in that schedule of license fees that we're going to be considering.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I'm not sure, or I'm not familiar with a set fee for any hearings. Perhaps Vance or Commissioner's office staff might have a bit more information, but it's certainly something we could circle back to if you'd like that information.
It's a fee for appealing, and it is in section 17.0703.
Vance, is that something you could clarify or maybe get back to us on?
If we do not have basically a fee to appeal a sale tobacco infraction or enforcement provision, then we should have one included somewhere. Now that we are taking on responsibility for the cities, the chances increase that we will have an appeal. And if we don't have a fee for the appeal specified so that any member of the public can see it, we probably can't charge it.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Ojro?
Yes, partly. So we still need to figure out whether or not we already have a hearings fee established somewhere in the record. And if we don't, we need to establish it along with the fee schedule for a license.
All right. And hopefully does staff maybe have a note of that moving forward? Perfect. Thank you. I'll just ask one more time if there's any public testimony. Seeing and hearing none, is there any testimony from any representative of any other governmental body? Hearing and seeing none, which means we can skip over the staff response. And I will close the public hearing. All right, commissioners, that brings us to deliberations. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or would you like to make a motion? Commissioner Ojro.
I guess just the one question that was raised by Christina Gensilla this morning, and that is about the 1,000-foot separation between locations that sell tobacco or tobacco-related products, including all of the vape stuff. Downtown is kind of different because of the high density of commercial businesses. Do we want to consider that? Or is that a Corvallis issue separately? Because this is just rural Benton County, correct? And all of the small towns that have opted in? No, it's Corvallis now too, isn't it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. So we are updating our Benton County code to implement on behalf of Adair Village, Monroe, City of Corvallis, City of Philomath. The 1,000-foot setback between retailers and the 1,000-foot setback from schools has been in place in Benton County's unincorporated area code, City of Corvallis code, and Philomath code since around 2016. So we've all already been operating with this. And I think Commissioner Weiss, if you remember, when this was presented to City Council and to our Board of Commissioners, it was done so with GIS mapping technology, where we plotted retailers and overlaid that with income level OHP members and found that our tobacco retail establishments were more densely located in areas with higher Oregon Health Plan membership. And so one of the things that we know about the tobacco industry is that they do a lot of marketing and targeted marketing through their retail establishments. And so to have our establishments located within 1,000 feet of schools or densely located in areas where there's higher level of poverty or OHP membership is really against what we're trying to do in public health to prevent future addictions and chronic illnesses from smoking and tobacco use.
Thank you. And I'll just clarify from, let's see if I can say this succinctly. Christina mentioned the exemption portion that was in the Corvallis code, and that was due to an individual, a gentleman who owned a business in Ward 6, actually. He owns the liquor store that used to be on Circle. And in the middle of this process, he had already, purchased or signed lease agreements or whatnot with the building on 9th Street. And was saying, hey, I'm already in the middle of moving, but if I move over here, I'm going to be in violation of that 1,000-foot rule. And so it was important to the council at the time to make an exemption for him because it's not his fault that the timing, was happening. So it was one of those things at a meeting, you kind of have to just, make a motion and change things to get it, the right way to pass it. So if you refer back to the City of Corvallis Council meeting minutes, it probably explains that much more succinctly than I just did.
Thank you for that. And I'll say that all of the codes that have this particular language in it had a grandfather clause. So essentially businesses that were already operating prior to the adoption of the updated code with the 1,000-foot language were allowed to continue to operate.
Yeah, and it was just a tricky situation with him because he would have been moving right after it came into effect. So, Commissioner,
do we need to do anything to address that situation, or will he be in violation if we pass this code?
I think.
Is there? Okay.
I think that's just an old subject. The previous.
Okay.
My take, and my understanding.
Want to make sure.
Perfect. All right, any other comments or questions, or there is a motion on page 78. I believe it's page 78. I noticed the packet is not numbered, but on my PDF it says page 78. Commissioner Malone?
Are we ready for a motion?
Yes, please.
I'll move to enact ordinance number 2022-0310, amending Benton County Code Chapter 17 and conduct a first reading.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Are you ready for the first reading?
Yes, please.
Before the Board of Commissioners for the State of Oregon for the County of Benton in the matter of amending Chapter 17 of the Benton County Code, ordinance number 2022-0310. Benton County Board of Commissioners ordain as follows. Short title, this ordinance shall be known as Amendment to Benton County Code Chapter 17. We will bring this item back on May 17th for the second reading. If the second reading occurs, the revisions to Chapter 17 will take effect on June 16th.
Thank you. Anything else we need to do for this agenda item before we move on? Looks like not. Thank you so much. I appreciate Sarah and Andy your time on this. And with that, we can go back to our proclamations. We have 5.1 in the matter of proclaiming May 15th through 21st, 2022 as National Public Works Week.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning, and we appreciate having a week in our behalf. It's always cool to be recognized for public works. With that said, here's the proclamation. In the matter of proclaiming May 15th to 21st, 2022 as National Public Works Week in Benton County, public works infrastructure, facilities, and services are of vital importance to sustainable communities and to health, safety, and well-being of the people of the county. And such facilities and services cannot be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who plan, build, operate, and maintain the transportation system, land records, water supply and sewage systems, motor pool, and public buildings and structures countywide. These professionals represent our local unit of government, and it is in the public interest for citizens and civic leaders of this county to gain knowledge of and maintain a progressive interest in and understanding of public works and public works programs in the community. And 2022 marks the 62nd annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association. The theme this year is Ready and Resilient. Now, therefore, the Board of Commissioners proclaims May 15th to 2022 as Public Works Week in Benton County and invites everyone to join us with the American Public Works Association to learn more about the vital importance of public works, the dedication of public works employees, and to celebrate their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Commissioner Malone?
I'll move to proclaim May 15 through 21, 2022 as National Public Works Week in Benton County, proclamation number 2022-008.
Second.
All right, motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
The important question for Gary, is there a barbecue this year?
Well, we're still kind of in holding pattern because of COVID, so the answer would be no.
Hopefully next year.
Yes, hopefully next year.
All right, thank you, Gary. And we can move on to proclamation, 5.2 in the matter of proclaiming May as Asian American and Pacific Islanders Heritage Month in Benton County. And we have with us Johan.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm excited to read this proclamation for you all. I did have a community member who was really excited to be a reader, but she had family emergencies that wasn't able to come out and do the reading, so I'll be reading for you all today. But hopefully she'll be able to join us for a future reading. So the month of May brings the National Celebration of Asian American and Pacific Islander AAPI Heritage. Since May of 1979, a week in May was designated to honoring the heritage of Asian and Pacific Americans. The length of time was expanded through Congress, and in 1990, the week was expanded to Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. The month of May was chosen to honor two specific dates: May 7th, 1843, when the first Japanese immigrants arrived in the United States, and May 10th, 1869, the anniversary of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, which was primarily laid by Chinese immigrants. This May, we celebrate centuries of Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage. Asian American and Pacific Islanders are the fastest growing racial group in America and the second fastest group in Oregon with over 260,000 people. In Benton County, approximately 7.5% of the population identifies as Asian, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander. The Asian diaspora covers a wide variety of people, cultures, and languages, religions, and experiences. We emphasize the importance of celebrating all cultures from the Asian diaspora, including East Asia, such as Korea, Japan, and China, Southeast Asia, Philippines, Laos, Vietnam, for example, South Asia, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, Central Asia of Mongolia, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan, and the Pacific Islands of Hawaii, the Samoa, and Fiji, and of course many other countries as well. Benton County has been home to many Asian American and Pacific Islander people and communities. In 1880, Chinese immigrants established a small Corvallis Chinatown within the Avery Helm Historic District that was unfortunately lost in a fire in the 1920s. In the early 1800s, Hawaiians came to what is now Oregon to participate in the fur trade. And today we have over 50 individual cultural groups from throughout the Asia and Pacific Islands living in Oregon. We celebrate centuries of cultural connections between Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. We also celebrate our visitors from other countries who are studying, working, and living in our communities. Acknowledging the history and heritage of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders includes acknowledging a history of discrimination and exclusion. In the 1880s, many Chinese people in Oregon were expelled from various cities, where many moved up together to Portland. In 1886, Oregon hosted an anti-Chinese convention in Portland. National and state laws continued to push xenophobia that harmed our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. We acknowledge the exclusionary practices and laws within Oregon that have historically harmed Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. The pandemic and recent events of violence have shown that we must continue our work toward making our communities safe and welcoming for all. We show solidarity and support for all Asian American and Pacific Islanders, not just during May, but every day. Therefore, be it hereby proclaimed that May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in Benton County, and all community members are encouraged to join in the observation and celebration.
Thank you, Johan. Do I hear a motion?
I would move that we approve the proclamation of May as Asian American and Pacific Islanders Heritage Month in Benton County, Proclamation P 2022-009.
I will second that.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you so much, Johan, and please pass along our thanks to the community member on her willingness to participate, and we wish her family well. All right, and with that, we can move on to Proclamation 5.3 in the matter of proclaiming May as Wildfire Preparedness Month. And I believe with us we have Brian Lee. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, commissioners. So just real quick, every year May is the National Wildfire Preparedness Month. And of course, with this year's discussions on the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, our evacuation drills, and all of our other wildfire coordination efforts, and with the acknowledgement of our 2020 Labor Day fires here in Oregon, I just want to kick off that and then go into the proclamation. The proclamation for the matter of proclaiming May 2022 as Wildfire Preparedness Month in Benton County. Whereas the threat of wildfires will greatly impact the entire region, including the residents of Benton County, Oregon, and the impact of climate change has greatly increased the risk of wildfires in Oregon. When individuals take responsibility for preparing their families, their communities, the chance of survival and return to normalcy following a disaster is greatly increased, and Wildfire Preparedness Month was designed to bring awareness of the threat of wildfires, and the Benton County Sheriff's Office Emergency Management Division partners with federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, private, and volunteer agencies to inform individuals on how to take action through our public education campaigns and community exercises, and where residents, businesses, and visitors of Benton County, Oregon are urged to plan ahead for all disasters and encourage their family and their friends to also do so by participating in annual readiness events and drills. And Benton County Emergency Management and Benton County Emergency Operations Center staff will participate in monthly training and exercises and planning activities. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Benton County Board of Commissioners, May 2022 as the Wildfire Preparedness Month, and encourage all community members, businesses, and visitors to develop their own emergency preparedness plans and practice evacuation drills.
Thank you, Brian. Do I hear a motion? Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, before the motion, I'm thrilled that all the rain that we have, that the fire season will definitely be starting later than last year. So we're off to a good start, and I will be glad to proclaim May 2022 as Wildfire Preparedness Month in Benton County, proclamation P 2022-007.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move on to 5.4 in the matter of proclaiming May 1st through 7th, 2022 as Public Service Recognition Week. And with this again, we have Johan.
Hello again. Before I get started, I really want to make sure we are highlighting the Rewards and Recognition Committee. They've been doing some wonderful work recognizing our employees. So this is also really a statement for them as well, and all of us who are working here in public works or public recognition, public service, as well as also the other community members benefiting who are also public service recognition besides our county employees. So during Public Service Recognition Week, we express our gratitude to our county employees for their dedication to mission, service, and stewardship. These individuals deliver results for those who live, work, study, play, and worship in Benton County, often without acclaim. We join the federal, state, and local governments nationwide that are participating in Public Service Recognition Week since its inception in 1985. Government is the way we come together to provide the services and amenities that promote the well-being of our communities in Benton County. We practice our motto, at your service every day, while keeping in mind our core values of equity and health in all actions. Each of Benton County's 610 employees, whether they are work a part-time or full-time schedule, from an office, their home, or in the field, provides valuable service to the community. County employees serve in a multitude of roles. Many expanded their work to other sectors over the past year to support our communities. They keep the water running in our service districts, provide for our orderly community development, keep our roads and bridges safe, sustain parks and natural areas for recreation, prosecute suspected lawbreakers, provide for public safety, ensure fair elections, support technological advancement and security, provide physical and behavioral health care for all. All of our staff have navigated shifting roles and experiences as we navigate the third year of the pandemic. We have welcomed many new employees to our organization and saw others move on to their next roles, many of which include continued service to the public. Public service also includes the community members who have supported our community every day. They include teachers, doctors, scientists, train conductors, nurses, safety inspectors, laborers, computer technicians, social workers, volunteers, and countless other occupations. Together, we continue to support our communities and are committed to improving our work in centering equity, health, and sustainability. Now, therefore, in light of the extraordinary effort all of our staff put forth every day, in particular in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Benton County Board of Commissioners hereby proclaims May 1st through 7th, 2022 Public Service Recognition Week. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. Commissioner Ojero?
I'd be happy to make the motion to proclaim May 1st through 7th, 2022 as Public Service Recognition Week, Proclamation P 2022-010.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to the Rewards and Recognitions Committee.
Yes. And thank you, Johan. And I just want to note, sometimes it might seem tedious to go through all of these proclamations, but I think they really are meaningful and worthwhile. And I'm glad that we do them. And with that, we can move on to old business. Item 6.1, discussion and decision regarding American Rescue Plan Act, our notice of funding opportunity funding recommendations with Rick Krager and Jen Ambule. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Great to see you all. I would like to request, if I could, to be able to share my screen. Great. Thank you so much. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. Excellent. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for having us here today. We're really excited to bring this phase of the work forward to you. It's been quite a process, but I think, and I'm hoping that you are pleased with the results that we're here to share with you today. Our request is really to review what we are recommending here today as 18 funding awards out of the American Rescue Plan Act. And I've provided you material in your packets. And as I said yesterday in an email I sent you, it's a little bit daunting in terms of all of the list. It was meant to really show you kind of a recap of the entire process, applications that we have received, as well as a summary of the applications that we are recommending. And certainly can take questions as you might have, but today I'll try to just provide you sort of the overview of everything. So just again, let's just recap a little bit of where we've been. This journey all started back in December when we came in front of you with a preliminary plan as it relates to the notice of funding opportunity. I think we spent a good fair amount of time, a good process of really listening to our community partners to hear from them on what they thought of that notice. Was very intentional about collecting that feedback, bringing it back to you, and then you also had more feedback that we were able to listen to in early parts of February. We were able to release the NOFA on February 18th on time, and as we had advertised, we put that out for approximately 3 weeks, closing on March 11th. We got a total of 34 applications that requested $6.9 million. And as you recall, we only have 2.4 in terms of being able to award. So certainly there was a high demand. Our evaluation committee, we convened to begin the review process 3 days later and was able to get them started. And they did a great job over the course of 2 weeks of evaluating every application in detail and doing a scoring and using the scoring matrix that was part of the NOFA. They then came and recommended that I do some additional due diligence because I think we all learned that there was, the devil's always in the detail and you really need to get into the weeds a little bit more before we move forward with recommendations. And so I spent another few weeks all the way up to April 20th really going through all of these applications and the recommendations they made to ensure compliance with the rules, regulations. And then, of course, they reviewed my final proposal on April 26th and recommended what you see for you here today. So let me just do a little summary for you here. This is the review of the applications submitted. As I mentioned, there were 34 applications that came to us. 27 of those were from nonprofit organizations, 5 from government organizations, and 2 from 2 private sector businesses that applied. Again, just slightly south of $6.6 million in total request. You can see it's spread out. The categories that you see before you, these are the U.S. Treasury expenditure categories. This is what we have to report to. This is what we have to comply with. So I've structured these in a way so you can see how they fit within. See, again, it's pretty well spread out, but the big 3, if you will, mental health services, household assistance, and addressing educational disparities. Those were the majority of the applications that we received. So then just to kind of take a pause here, we met with, again, the evaluation committee using the criteria that was outlined in the NOFA. Again, that was between March 18th and March 30th. I want to, again, just take a pause and really recognize these 6 individuals. They put a lot of work to this, and I was very pleased with the diligence that they did this in. They really were good about focusing on the criterion. They were very pleased with the applications. They said there were a lot of great applications. We wish we had more money. But again, these 6 individuals really want to just kudos to all of them. They were all terrific. We did have one other member. Unfortunately, during the process, she had to drop out because she wasn't able to be able to finish and complete the work. So we just went with the 6. So again, just lots of thanks to all of them. This is just a recap for you. You've seen this before. This was the evaluation criteria that they used. This was in the NOFA. This was printed. This is how we were going to evaluate. Each of the evaluation committee members had questions that were specific in relation to these. They judged those based on a matrix that you also approved as part of the NOFA. So again, spent a lot of time going through these. Community impact, organizational capacity were kind of 2 of the big weighted areas that they really looked at. And again, was just real pleased on how they had used that as their criteria and their guidance. The other thing that they all focused on was equity. And as we all talked about, we wanted to lead with equity. We wanted to put a priority to that. And again, they all used that as, again, it's a little bit of a judgment, but I think they were able to very consistently pull out the ones that were more specifically and intentionally focused on equity. So this is just so you have assurance in terms of what the evaluation review process looked like. We did have conflict of interest forms that were available, that they were completed and signed. There were a few of them that obviously had conflicts of interest. So we did capture all of those ahead of time. Each evaluator was given a spreadsheet, and they were asked to provide scoring sheet on each of the criterion that you just looked at, with, of course, the exception of anything that had conflict of interest on. We pulled those applications from them. Their scoring matrix was between a 1 and a 10, 1 being low to 10 high. Jen did a great job of setting up a spreadsheet that calculated all of this for them in accordance to the weights. Again, as I mentioned, they also were reviewing for equity. That was a yes/no answer. And again, we used that to make sure we wanted to lead with equity and ensure that all the applications, or at least the majority of the applications that we had, were really considering that. All of these were returned to Jen on March 30th. For the most part, we got everybody in on time. There was a few that we had to just at the end get through, but again, lots of commitment on the parts of the evaluators. And then we compiled all of that information for a final ranking, and you saw that in your material, which brings us to the discussion that we had with the evaluation committee on March 30th. So again, they met with the collective results. They were able to see these. I think based on the amount of funding we had, at that point, we only had 8 applications that could be funded with what they had asked for. So clearly, 8 out of 34, we were hoping to see a little bit more than that. I think, again, the evaluation committee was very clear there was good applications in here. And so that led them to what I call a tier approach. They really saw natural breaks in the scoring, which are listed here, 101 to 120, 90 to 100, and then 0 to 89. The ones that were the best applications, all of these were rated as 100% equity focused. And what I mean by that is all the raters, all the evaluators, excuse me, listed and judged those as being 100% equity focused. So every evaluator had been consensus on that. And then the tier 2 was the next highest. A lot of really good applications in this, and for the most part, all of those were 100% equity focused. And the ones that weren't, just so you're not worrying too much, there were a few evaluators that said, well, I don't know if it really reached it or not, but the majority of the evaluators had it. So this was a good natural breaking point in each case, both for scoring and equity. Tier 3 clearly was the lower applications, and certainly, there were still likely good applications, particularly at the higher end, but of course we only have so much money we're able to provide, and had to create a natural breaking point there. I think the other thing the committee was very clear on, and I alluded to, was there probably needed to be a lot more due diligence, and in particularly around kind of 3 areas. Some of the things that we talked about together ahead of time is that we really wanted to meet immediate need. Some of these applications were going out 3 years in terms of use of funds. And as we all know, we have planned future funding rounds. So that was something I think that jumped out as, do we really need to provide the funding for a 3-year gap? We're really trying to meet immediate need. So really trying to focus on the next 12 months of resources. The next thing, and this is really important, is the ability to meet the U.S. Treasury criterion. So while the ARPA dollars are flexible, they still have requirements, and we still have to make sure as the recipient of these funds that all of these subrecipients are meeting them. And so it was very important that I go through all of these and really make sure that they were hitting those criteria. And I think for the most part, I thought they did a great job. There were a few that were some outliers, and you see some of those in my notes where I pulled it out and said that, this just really doesn't qualify. But I think for the most part, everyone did a great job. And then the other thing is just current organizational capacity. And what I mean by that is, the amount of dollars that we're providing, are they going to actually be able to administer that in the short period of time that we have here? We have to be thoughtful of that. The other piece to organizational capacity was, and you'll see in some of the recommendations, was we had one particular applicant that has another Benton County award that has been given to them for the same purposes. So, were we really, is this the biggest need? So we looked at trying to be a little bit thoughtful about that as well. I spent the time from March 31st to April 20th, talked to a lot of these folks, actually all 18 of the ones that are being recommended. I've had conversations with all of them, either via email, via phone, a lot of clarification, but everybody's been great. There's been, no issues in terms of those discussions with those 18. Everybody's been very, very helpful in terms of trying to provide a solution. So with that, what I was able to do was really kind of go through with those 3 things in mind and begin looking at how can we stretch these resources? How can we get further down the list? And what I was able to do is bring before the evaluation committee 18 of the 20 applications that they considered tier 1 and 2. So there was only 2 of them I wasn't able to get to, and that was mostly from either full funding or partial funding. A lot of adjustments on some cases where maybe they asked for more than 12 months. That was one of the big things that brought us the ability to go further into this. And then ultimately, I brought this back to the evaluation committee a few weeks ago. They reviewed it quickly. They were very pleased with this, and all were consensus that we move this forward to you today. So that brings us to this. Here's the summary. Again, the green bars that you see here, that's the same thing you saw earlier in terms of the applications that have been submitted. The blue denotes what we are actually proposing to fund. So you can see, again, pretty good balance along the way. I think, the one that probably jumps out to me the most is assistance to impacted nonprofit organizations. There's 1 of 4 there. What I can say to you about that is I did look at the 3 that weren't funded, and including in the evaluation committee actually picked up on this well too. A lot of it just wasn't really fitting in. There wasn't enough depth in terms of that, and also not the ability to demonstrate what the actual need was. The criteria within ARPA around this particular category is very clear. You have to have a demonstrated need. We can't just give money to anyone. We have to be able to demonstrate, and that wasn't always clear in some of these applications. But again, that was probably the only one that, when I look from a categorical standpoint, that might be questionable. The other one, addressing educational disparities, you can see 2 of 6. I will say that one's a little bit more challenging to hit the criteria. Under the ARPA rules, you have to actually serve particular populations. You can't just, again, the thought is enrichment programs, right? Well, that makes sense. But if you're going to provide enrichment programs, it can only be for particular populations that either are low income or that have the ability to approve that there has been a COVID impact. I personally think one of the reasons the U.S. Treasury did that, because this was changed in the final rule, was because there is a lot of education money in the system right now that can also meet these needs. So again, the school districts I know have a lot of ESSER dollars that are available for enrichment type programs. So again, that's what I would say to that. It was just, again, a harder category to really hit. So this is a little a bright, colorful graph here for you, just to show you where all the money's going. So this is basically the 18 awards, the different categories. You can see it's pretty well distributed in terms of the variation categories. Long-term housing insecurity is your biggest. That's not surprising to me, because clearly a lot of those applications are, about housing assistance, or they could be about serving a very, very vulnerable population, which, has a cost associated to it. So it was not surprising to see that as the largest amount. But that, again, gives you an idea of how those distribution of resources on those 18 applications are. And then finally, if you are to award these and to approve these today, wanted to give you just sort of what the next steps are. Obviously, we need to have executed grant agreements for all of these. Be talking to Vance in terms of the form to use on this. Again, really want to establish as we move through this. There will be federal monitoring requirements. We have to ensure those. Jen and I have already been diving into a lot of those, making sure that we're following the letter of the law. But at the same time, we want to aim for simplicity. We don't want to make this overly difficult. It doesn't have to be, but there are, again, some rules that we're going to have to ensure to be able to report back to the feds. Some of those, things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to issue notification on requirements to subrecipients. Some of these organizations may not be used to receiving federal funds, and in some cases, and I'm seeing that most of these are all going to be okay, because it's going to be less than 750,000. So they're not going to have some of those audit requirements that many organizations do. So that's good news. But again, it's a cumulative over time. So that's something we have to watch out for. There is a risk assessment process that we have to go through. And that's really for our protection and because the U.S. Treasury knows a lot of these organizations may be smaller. What's the risk of non-compliance? They want to make sure we as the recipient are looking at this and planning ahead to make sure that we have supports in place for some of these organizations to help them through. Already mentioned the fully executed grant agreement. Nonprofits, I mentioned, would be subject to the Single Audit Act requirement, but again, that shouldn't hit them because of the amount of award. Some of those that do have the larger awards are more, I would say, organizations that are used to this. So that should be fine there. The payment of funds will be on a reimbursement basis. And I want to just make sure I pause there, because I know that might make some folks nervous, particularly when you're talking about a smaller organization. What I mean with provisions of incremental advances, having dealt with this a little bit in small rural school districts, one of the things that we were able to do was put in place what is called I called it a quasi-reimbursable basis, where we're able to advance the dollars up front, but we only do incrementals, and then they report out that they have actually used it or are using it, and then we do the next incremental. So there is a way to get there to really help those smaller organizations, because I know it's hard. I know it's hard to be able to advance that money and ask for reimbursement. So I can assure you that it's with the letter of the law, but in addition, it will make it easier for the districts. And then finally, we will have to report quarterly. We're one of those that unfortunately, because we're above $10 million in total ARPA dollars, we have to report quarterly. So we have to get quarterly information from our subrecipients on this. So that's really sort of the overall next step. Before I kind of turn it over to you, commissioners, I want to address one last thing. So I think this has been a really good process. I think I think we've worked hard to make sure we've learned a lot, but we've worked hard to make sure that we've been transparent. The evaluation committee has been really good in terms of helping us. I feel good about the due diligence that's happening. But as always, you always find quirks, right? I think Jen and I learned that the system that we had probably wasn't as user-friendly as we would have liked. One thing that I want to make you all aware of that we learned late, I think it was early last week, we got contact from another applicant or someone that thought they had applied and had not heard anything. And we were both sort of stunned, both Jen and I. So as we looked through our system, we could find no record of them. The instructions that we had provided to the community was, if you want to apply, you have to, there was a contact name, Jen. She was the master, the keeper of all of the users, and she was able to set those users up so they could directly apply. And that went really well. I think there wasn't really any confusion on that. I think most everybody called Jen and was set up. What happened is that there was an individual from this organization that did get set up, but what they did is they weren't the applicant. They had done a sub assignment of this to someone else in the organization. We were not set up for that. That was not the way the system had worked. And so when it was sub, the person that got that sub did the application, thought they hit submit, but it didn't go anywhere. It stayed there. So basically it was, excuse me, sorry. It essentially sit there in their queue, but it looked to them like they had actually submitted. So I had long conversations with the organization last week regarding this and explained to them. And I talked to the evaluation committee that we have gone through a process. And basically, if I were to kind of put this back, I feel like I would be disingenuous to the other applicants that had followed all the protocols. However, I did want to put out there that, while I think this process is sound and you will make decisions on this, you obviously have the ability outside of this process, should you choose, if you wish the committee to reevaluate this committee perhaps outside the process. And we also know that there are ARPA dollars that are at least now earmarked for future rounds that you could potentially decide. But again, I wanted to separate those issues. It felt like the right thing to do because we've had a process. It's been sound. The evaluation committee was fully supportive of this decision, but they were also fully supportive of me being transparent with you to let you know about that. And certainly I'm happy to give you any more detailed information that you might like. So with that, Commissioner Wise, that is my presentation to you, but I'm happy to dive into any questions that you have over this or any of the detailed material that was provided to you.
Thank you, Rick. Any comments or questions for Rick? Commissioner Malone?
I was very impressed with the process, Rick. This seemed well designed. I remember a conversation after the first of the year, and I think you wanted to have it wrapped up in February, which shows what an optimist you are. But I appreciate the thoroughness and coming out with, I think, excellent results. And I noticed several of comments were, well, we're doing a 1-year process and you're asking for a 2 or 3 year grant, and that didn't fit. But just really impressed, I guess, on the latecomer to the process. The only thing I would say is if your committee wanted to take a look and see if they fit, I think we could probably come up with the dollars. But it's important that everybody goes through the same process, or it's not fair. You know, there were a couple that just barely missed the cutoff, and so I guess I would look for a little further advice on that. My last comment is I really appreciate the equity focus. So often, I think of the 2017 tax bill that came out of Congress, and how unequitable that whole thing was. And you know, we don't have that kind of money, that kind of clout, but this shows that we can try to even things out. So thank you for emphasizing that. So I think that's what I had.
So Commissioner Lowe, I will say one thing. You warned me about it. I was being a bit naive early on, thinking that I could get this thing done by March. So you were right. I was wrong. And certainly, but it again, you know, good process. You want to take the time to do it right. And I feel like that's exactly the advice you gave. And I think that's what you have before you here today. So thank you.
Well, Rick, we like your enthusiasm and your ability to pivot and be flexible. Thank you. And I do have an opinion on the one applicant, but Commissioner Ojero, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Chair Wise. I wanted to also thank Jen and Rick and the committee for all the work that you've put in. Clearly, it was a lot of work. I concur with Commissioner Malone that we should not entertain this other proposal that ended up out in limbo at this time. I think that it behoove us to set the date for the next round of proposals so that they know when they can next put their hat in, and that they have to do it per instructions in order for the process to work right. I am disappointed that we didn't have enough money to make it through that tier 2 list. And I know we could probably say, let's just increase the bucket a little bit right now, but I think that we'd be better off also just encouraging them to apply in our next round, also to honor the integrity of the process. The last thing I wanted to say is that it would be interesting in future to see, I know we had a lot of interest and inquiries in terms of infrastructure related projects for nonprofits versus the staffing and immediate programmatic need. I'd be interested in seeing a little bit of an analysis, how much ended up in each of those buckets. And the other is the rural versus urban, or the Corvallis centric versus the rest of the county. I'd like to see that as information as well. I know that that's a little bit tougher because some of the organizations that are based in town, whether here or over in Albany, like ABC House, serve populations that are everywhere. It's not, even though they're located in town. So, but it would be nice to get a sense for that as well. And maybe some of that can be done through some of the reporting that the groups do.
Commissioner Ojero, thank you for that. And one thing to just sort of respond specifically to that, I did have inquiries with every one of the 18 applicants about their scope of population and where they're serving. So I do have that information. I was a little reluctant to put it here just because I feel like I still need to work because that, you're right, that will be in the reporting requirements. But I will come back to you with a little bit more, because I didn't want to give you something that might still flex a little bit. But I can assure you that I felt really good about at least the broadness of the net in relation to this. The other thing I wanted to mention, Commissioner Ojiro, too, and it always breaks breaks my heart trying to, there's so many good applications you go through, and it's like, where do you stop? You wish you just had more money. I would suggest, though, as I go through this executing the agreements, there are opportunities for things to maybe fall out. And so I would suggest, and one of the things I put into your recommended motion was, at least for the tier 2, the 2 applications that weren't funded, is that there be consideration that if things do drop out, that I have the opportunity to come back to you and maybe either consider those 2, or perhaps on some of those that we did partials, to be able to expand those. And then the last thing I'll say, Commissioner Ojo, to your question about infrastructure, I think that's the one part that was, I don't want to say disappointing, but and maybe part of it is we want to be more intentional, but there wasn't a lot of infrastructure components to this. Good projects, don't get me wrong. I mean, a lot of good focus on needs, but there was really only one project that had an infrastructure component, and I think that was the Arc of Benton County, specifically to a rehab. So I think that there's opportunities for that, and it might be something we want to talk about as you carve out the next round, and how do you want to influence that, perhaps, because you have that opportunity. So thank you, Commissioner Ojo, for your comments.
Thank you. And I have some comments and questions. First off, I'm highly satisfied with the process as far as the scoring process and the valuation committee. That's great. And then I think we, learned a lesson about our program and can hopefully know what to do to avoid that next time. When it comes to the one applicant, I am in agreement with the other commissioners that unfortunately, mistakes happen, accidents happen, but it just would not be equitable at this time to go back and kind of, restart the process again. And that just kind of opens up a can of worms of, do we let, other people who just missed the deadline go in there? So I do agree with that. Again, the charts and visuals that you included are just above and beyond. That is very helpful, and I really appreciate that. Let's see. Is it possible, can you screen share the summary of evaluation committee scoring page, just for anyone who's watching at home or watching later on for the recorded video? It's also page 110 in the packet, I believe. And that way we can just get a visual of top to bottom all of the applicants. Perfect.
You see that all right, commissioners?
Yes.
So thank you, Commissioner. And again, this is, as you said, part of the packet. This is sort of a summary of kind of everything. Forget some of my little notes here. I apologize. Get that tidied up here a little bit. So this is all 34 of the applications. The yellow, green, and gray is sort of the tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 that I had talked about. You see the average scoring. This is what you don't see here is I did not disclose all the committee individual scores, but certainly if you're ever interested, I'm happy to do that. But again, I was very proud of them. They all did a great job, and it was very consistent in terms of how they did the scoring. You can see the funds that were requested, and then the blue area is what the due diligence sort of indicated. And then in your other notes, the other sheet that you have, it talks about how I sort of come up with that funds proposed. And like I said, a big part of that was really reducing the what in some cases was 36 months worth of need into 12 months worth of need.
Thank you, Rick. And I think you kind of addressed this question already when you were talking about organizational capacity, but just said another way, sort of the scalability of some of these programs. And, we talked about how some of these are not fully funded. but obviously you feel confident that the partial funding will still go to good use.
Yeah, there was a couple areas that I looked at, and again, you always want to be able to put as much money out, but looking at the amount of funds versus sort of the scale of what they have, the organizational capacity, some of the experience, and it seemed more reasonable, particularly when you're trying to make resources go further, is to also be able to give them something that they can perhaps come back at. If they're very successful, there's nothing that stops them from coming back in the future to ask for other dollars to be able to move that forward. So there were, I would say 1 or 2 occasions like that. There was another one specifically as it relates to, as I mentioned, we have a CDBG application that is pending for $400,000 for housing assistance. This is the Dev Northwest. So we reduced that down a little bit, just again to marry those resources together. There's plenty of need, certainly, for housing assistance, but at the same time wanted to be thoughtful about, okay, we've got a lot of resources coming to other places. How are we working together? The other thing I failed to mention, all this, commissioners, is that I was also, and thanks to Joe for really making sure that I was being, real transparent with City of Corvallis. I had a conversation with them about this before to make sure I wasn't duplicating anything in terms of getting their advice. So worked very closely with them, having understanding, and also got some insight, particularly on housing and homelessness from our group there. They were really insightful about some of those proposals because they're some of our larger ones.
All right, thank you. I'm glad that you thought of that. That's great. All right, any comments or questions from commissioners, or we can also entertain a motion. And there is a Commissioner Ojero.
I'd be happy to make a motion. I would like to approve the expenditure of $2,385,320 from the ARPA grants pursuant to the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the 18 top-ranked applicants. Plus, I would like to provide our Chief Financial Officer the flexibility to consider the last 2 projects that are above the line or in Tier 2 if funding should become available due to one of the other applicants not being able to fully participate.
I will second that and appreciate the addition there.
Thank you. And that I just want to make sure, Erica or whoever, did you get that motion okay, or do we need any clarification?
Yeah, I believe I have the essence, and I can also review the recording. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much, commissioners. Really appreciate you. And, this is, we're happy to move forward. Last thing I want to say, and I didn't say before, I want to really thank Jen. She's been great. We've been a team here in terms of working this evaluation committee, but I neglected to really thank her for all the work. And we're both delighted also to say that we're in the final interviews of our grant coordinators. So both of us have been collectively taking this on. So hopefully we'll be able to bring in a new person here relatively soon to kind of take this on. So thank you so much, Jen, for all you do.
Thank you, Rick. And Joe, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to acknowledge that all 3 of the commissioners expressed appreciation to our staff. And I just want to underscore that the countless hours that Rick and Jen have spent on this particular effort since December, just countless hours, significant effort of work. And I think it shows today where the results, I think, were very positive, and certainly the evaluation committee took their job very seriously. So I really liked the process. It was thorough. It was disciplined. There was a lot of rigor. And when Rick was indicating that he called all 18 of those potential recipients, that's a lot of phone calls. That's a lot of phone tag. And so thank you for doing that additional rigor, Rick. So thanks to everybody. Good process. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Joe. And I want to piggyback off that and say and add my thanks. And thank you, Jen, and thank you, Rick. And please pass on our thanks to the evaluation committee. We really appreciate their work that they did on this as volunteers. That's great. And just in general, this is great. This is something that we should celebrate. This is a big deal. Like, we are really helping our community out there. That's wonderful. So yay. All right. Anything else on this topic before we move on? Seeing none, I am going to call for a 5-minute break. So we will come back at 12:18. texted me earlier, can I eat the last of the pizza? And I went, no, yes, okay, fine.
What part of the agenda are we on, Nancy?
I believe we're at new business. 7.1, discussion and decision to appoint a behavioral health director.
I was wondering if lunch was an agenda item or.
Well, if you want to send us all lunch, Pat. All right, it looks like we
warm up your 3D printer.
All right, well, it looks like we have everyone with us, so we can move on to 7.1. And I see Suzanne Hoffman and Danielle Brown with us. Welcome.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm going to introduce this briefly, but then I really want to turn it over to Danielle. It could be her, perhaps her last official act in this role, as we wish her well. Today is Danielle's last day with the Benton County Health Department. And before she departs, we have a very important piece of business that we need to ask of you. As you know, we have appointed Ashley Telemontes and Ricky Garcia, and I would invite them to turn their cameras on if they're able to, as co-directors, interim co-directors of the Behavioral Health Division. As you know, the Health Department has used a co-director model in the past for interim work while seeking to fill a permanent vacancy. Ashley and Ricky are very experienced at this co-leadership model, as it is a model that they already deploy for the adult outpatient services within the Behavioral Health Division. So we've asked them to take that division-wide as we recruit for a permanent behavioral health director, and they have generously agreed to do so. So we have them both here today, so that if you haven't already, you'd have a chance to meet them and thank them. And so what we need to do in order to be compliant with Oregon Administrative Rule is to actually have you take a vote today, specifically with regard to Ashley's interim appointment as our Community Mental Health Program Director. And I'm going to turn it over to Danielle to explain that a bit more. It's similar to when we appoint a public health administrator and come to the board for that official designation, so that we can reflect to the state that we are in compliance. So Danielle?
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, commissioners, for letting me join you this afternoon. As the Community Mental Health Program, the local mental health authority, we have to have a behavioral health director appointed to oversee all of our behavioral health services for the Benton County Health Department. That person does have to be a clinician, so we, as Suzanne explained, have decided to have that role split with Ricky and Ashley. And I'll apologize, Ricky had to join by phone. He had a personal appointment, so he is on by phone, but that's why you don't see him on camera. Anyways, Ashley has been working for the health department for a number of years and has taken on our role as our outpatient clinical manager since 2018, 19, Ashley, question mark, something like that, and has served as our clinical manager for our outpatient program for a number of years and done an amazing job. She is a licensed professional counselor and is also certified to do supervision for licensed candidates for the health department. So we're asking that the commissioners review her application today and appoint her as behavioral health director in the interim while the position is being posted and recruited for a permanent hire.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, commissioners?
Be happy to make a motion.
Perfect.
I would propose that we appoint Ashley Telemontes as the interim behavioral health director, and with pleasure.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Yay, except for Danielle leaving us. That part's sad. Joe?
Commissioner, you just mentioned it. I just wanted to highlight Danielle and the many efforts that she has made on the behalf of our behavioral health program. It's been a very productive time, Danielle, since the time that you joined us, and I've appreciated just everything that you've been able to advance for us in order that we can serve our community even better. So I wish you the best of luck, and thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I have full faith in Ashley and Ricky carrying my work forward. So they'll do an amazing job.
Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Danielle for her efforts on behalf of Benton County. I remember a couple years back where you were, well, actually at Pfizer building at the EOC and holding down the fort there, and in addition to trying to keep track of your day job, and I really appreciate your efforts, Danielle, and sad to see you go, but sounded like you've got a good job warming up. So, but many thanks for the efforts that you've put in.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's definitely been a lot of work, but my pleasure doing it. And I look forward to seeing where this whole department goes in the future.
Thank you. And I see Sheriff Van Arsdal turned his camera on. Sheriff, is there anything you'd like to say?
I just wanted to thank Danielle and wish her the best. Good luck. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Very
I've
good.
embarrassed Danielle before, but I think I'm going to do it again. Danielle, you came in at a time when the health department, the behavioral health program needed a total reset. You did that with the support of the rest of the organization. You have consolidated and strengthened our services, decreased wait times, improved the continuity of services to reduce gaps so that fewer people fall between the cracks, and expanded programs, taking back the children's and family program and embracing the partnership with the Corvallis Police Department to start CORE. So for all of that, and for being even more present in our jail, working with behavioral, with all of the folks in corrections and the courts, thank you. You took on drug treatment court. My goodness, I mean, you have set and laid the groundwork for the path forward. We haven't addressed all the gaps yet, crisis centers yet to come, but you've certainly set us on a path. And so Ashley and Ricky, you have a big job to play as interims, and I look forward to continuing on this path as we move forward. Thank you, Danielle, for everything.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. And I've been trying really hard today not to cry all day, so I'm going to try and keep it together.
Thank you. All right. Well, with that, I think we can move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And that brings us to 7.2, discussion and decision to adopt order number 2022-043, increasing annual tobacco retail license fees. And it looks like Andy is back with us, and maybe also Sarah. Hello.
Thank you, commissioners, and I'll have Sarah will, of course, have to jump in here too. This is related to the earlier code update for tobacco retail licensing. And again, this fee will support the administration of that license as opposed to handing the keys over to the state, which does charge close to $1,000 a year per retailer for their tobacco license. So if there are any questions, I believe the language of the motion is in the agenda.
Yes, question or comments, or Commissioner Malone and then Commissioner Ojro.
Yeah, earlier there was a discussion about that Commissioner Ojero brought up about a hearing fee, and there was a discussion, but I don't remember any resolution, and I guess I would ask County Council to weigh in. Do we need to amend the motion at this time, or is it ready to go, and that that we can, if we need to, fix the county's hearing fee at a later date?
So I think it's probably cleanest to come back with a new order that sets the the appeal/hearing fee. Obviously, they would be, go hand in glove together. But at this point in time, it's really important that the fee be put in place so that these retailers who are going to be filing their applications for the upcoming 22-23 licensing year know what they're going to pay. So I will commit to you that Andy will bring back a new order before too long with the hearing and appeals fee. It's not a difficult thing to generate.
Great. So we're postponing this motion. Is that correct?
No, what we're doing, what you're being asked to do now is approve the fees for the retail licensing, for the tobacco licensing today. We will come back with a different order that establishes the hearing/appeal fee for somebody who challenges a citation or a decision not to issue a license.
Great, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Ojro, I saw your hand before.
I had the same question, so we're going to take a two-step process. And yeah.
All right, well, and I do see a motion on page 132 in the packet.
I'd be happy to make it. I would move to adopt order number D 2022-043, increasing the annual tobacco retail license fee to $560 to support the administration, implementation, and enforcement of the countywide tobacco retail license program.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, Sarah and Andy, thank you so much. And with that, we can move on to other. And Pat, you had an item you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, it concerns the Lynn County timber lawsuit, and I believe it's the circuit court decision last week finding in favor of the state, and wanted to have a discussion. I think it may have been two people emailed saying that Benton County should advise our attorneys, Lorenzo, to not pursue an appeal to the state Supreme Court. And one question that comes up, well, who's, and I haven't thought about this for a while, but who's paying this process? I'm sure has not been cheap. And is it correct, Vance, that the loser pays legal fees, or do we know how that will play out?
So I don't know the exact setup, but this type of litigation is nearly always a contingency fee based arrangement where the attorney representing, in this case, the class of governments would be paid a percentage out of the award, or if there's a settlement, a percentage of the settlement. So there is no, Benton County is not on the hook for any dollars at this time.
I guess I would propose, and give me some guidance how involved this would be, but to advise our attorney to not pursue a appeal to the state Supreme Court.
So I guess just let's back up about 4 steps. So Benton County is one of 15 counties and countless smaller districts, all of whom form the class that was certified by the circuit court. Gosh, Pat, I think we're talking almost 4 years ago now. It's been around 5 years ago. And what happens when a circuit court certifies a class, it provides a time period for any of the potential class members to choose to opt out of the class. So Benton County did not opt out, which means that class is now locked in. Everybody who chose to remain is a member of the class that is subject to whatever course of action occurs. Now, that's backstory. We can certainly, when the time comes for the attorney to seek guidance from the class, we can certainly voice an opinion that we do not believe an appeal is a good thing and that we prefer not to. However, I want to be very clear. This is, we are one lone voice in the forest, and this almost certainly will play out as it has for decades with regard to the forest trust lands. There are other counties with much larger tracts of forest land within their boundaries, and they have a very different interest than Benton County. I know Commissioner Jaramillo over the years had grown frustrated because Benton County's voice was trampled at times because the other interests from the counties with larger forest land acreage had very different ideas for how that property, that timberland was to be managed. Annabelle was dogged in her voice and her recommendations for how that land would be used, but consistently outvoted. So I believe that's almost certainly going to be the direction that a decision on appeal goes. Those same counties continue to hold the same perspectives. If the board wants me to do so, when the time comes for the county attorneys to put forward their input on an appeal, I can say Benton County does not favor an appeal if that's what if the board chooses. But just know it may not get very far.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. What I remember from 5 years ago was Benton County was of the group was about 3% of the total. So that, so we can talk about this at a later date when it's timely. Is that your okay?
Yep.
Appreciate the clarification.
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you, Pat, for or Commissioner Malone for bringing this up. It's good for us to consider, and we can bring it up again at a later date as needed. All right. I believe that will take us to our executive session. And let's just take 2 minutes to clear the room and get ready for our executive session. So we'll enter that at 12:40.